Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to an episode of Opinionated with yours truly. Hopefully you guys can hear me. I don't know what's going on. All of a sudden I had some weird sound issues. I don't know if you're hearing it. For some reason I just got this quick bump in and bump out when it comes to sound. I gotta figure it out. It just happened out of nowhere. Because I've been good. I've been straight for the day. So all of a sudden it just came up, whatever. But we're gonna figure that out. It's gonna be pretty much a informational kind of stream, not informational, but rather it's a questionable kind of stream as to why is it that a particular area, if you haven't already taken a look at the title, as to why has it never been prosperous? And I think for some of you, if you don't actually know or if you've ever had a burning question yourself, then it's the why hasn't Africa ever gotten it better? With a place that has one of the most abundant um amount of resources, why is it never really picked up? Why is it still sitting as still one of the largest continents to still be so back, so held back economically? And what exactly should they be doing to help better themselves in the future? Um, and then the main question is like, is it still back because of colonialism? Is that really the thing that's really happening, or is there another reason why Africa remains poor? You know, can they really just say it all stems from colonialism, or are there other bad practices that they're just holding on to, which is not exactly holding up to what needs to be done? Um, of course, this is opinionated with yours truly, and I don't really want to waste any more time because I kind of want to figure out everything else that might be going wrong. Not really too sure, but we're gonna rock with it anyway. I got a few videos that I want to take a look at. I'll be kind of deep diving into it at the same time as you, asking a whole bunch of questions. But this one has been on my mind. I've seen a couple of videos that came up in my feed, so they're the ones I'm also going to take a look at. And I pulled up two other videos, one that has a little bit of reference beforehand, so we can get an idea what's taking place. Then one that's actually been the ones that showed up on my feed, and then after that, one from a young lady who pretty much, I guess, she's responding to people. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. Let's see here. Okay, I'm not sure what that was about. Let's have a look here.
Africa is rich beyond imagination, blessed with natural resources from arable land, oil and natural gas, to minerals, forests, and wildlife. The continent is jam-packed with a sizable portion of the world's natural resources, both renewables and non-renewables. Even its history boasts of its own real-life Midas, known as Mansa Musa. But its present is marred with abject poverty, with 429 million people living beneath the extreme poverty line, roughly a third of the continent's total population. Today, the land might be burgeoning with riches, but the haunting sights most resonant with Africa are those of starving children with vacant eyes getting fed by food aid workers. Why the stark contrast? It's clear that the land is brimming with all kinds of natural assets, but it seems that the effects of such opulence are not trickling down to its burgeoning poor. Some suggest that Africa's poverty has been caused by a failure to break free of the colonial systems put in place by past European colonizers.
So they're still saying that it may still be part of the colonial system. As they said, it's the country is still rich in resources, whether and actually reusable resources. So even after the point where they become free, when freedom was pretty much a thing that was being spread throughout the majority of continents, the question became, why is it they didn't come back up? Is it a play on like economics? Is it a matter of education? Was that just the problem? How did that you were able to have all of these different countries that came in and quite frankly started giving up the land? Let's just be honest. Say, outside of say like the Sahara, right? You know, the largest desert pretty much. Why is it that Africa never really picked up? That's a big question that's always been in my head. And Africa go through its own thing with its history of slavery as well as many other countries, or rather many other continents as well, because everybody's had their share of pretty much going through that. my question is that this was a thing that should have been sorted out a long time ago to figure out why is it Africa never really picked up its roots. I've always wondered, but I never really could understand it. And anyone that I ever spoke to that ever came from Africa, when I did ask you questions, they all have different kind of opinions because there are just so many areas split up in Africa. Some doing well, some not doing too well, some still being hit by like rebels and stuff like that. So I wonder what is actually going to be the cause or the stated cause of what they believe to be the cause of what it is. And now I'm kind of wondering what that last video is going to be like because then there'll be actual people from that country that will give their own perspective. This is going to be a new learning lesson for me because this has been a burning question.
Even after the continent's nations gained independence, is that theory an answer to the conundrum of a poor Africa, or is there more to it? Here is an in-depth dive into what broke this beautiful continent. As we alluded to in the intro, Africa holds 30% of the world's mineral reserves, 8% of the world's natural gas reserves, and 12% of the world's oil reserves. It's home to 40% of the world's gold and 90% of its chromium and platinum, as well as the largest reserves of cobalt, diamonds, platinum, and uranium in the world. 65% of the world's arable land and 10% of its internal renewable freshwater source are found within this natural treasure trove. Imagine how many other rich secrets lay buried within this unexplored fertile soil. In his book, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, Walter Rodney argues that Western capitalist nations developed by the systemic underdevelopment of African nations. While it's true that the relationship between the colonized and the colonizer is intrinsically and openly parasitic, and Africa was no different with its European masters, judging by how much water has passed under that bridge, this argument has lost a bit of steam. Africa's colonial past may have contributed to its cash-strapped present, but there are country-sized holes in the theory, one of them being Singapore. Much like Africa, Singapore was a resource-strapped piece of land that
I'm not sure that's a good comparison, to be honest with you. I'm not sure that, yeah, you know what? I do see that the fact that Singapore was also a place that was occupied for quite some time and then they were able to have the liberation. But I don't think that we can compare Africa to Singapore. Um, one, I don't know the vast amount of stuff when it comes to Singaporean culture. I do know that I do know there's a big occupation. I don't know as much of like say slavery or the selling of slaves when it comes to Singapore. But also, here's what I'm thinking right off the bat: resources. I don't think that Singapore and Africa share the same kind of resources. For one, Singapore is such a small, area compared to an entire continent of Africa, and not everywhere in Africa is the most fertile. I know that Africa deals with droughts. I know there's a lot of areas where crops are just having a problem, coming up. So the soil production can get pretty bad. And then again, I don't Singapore blew up. So that means they were able because now they had big industries that came in. They're big in the tech boom right now. These things never necessarily happened for Africa. Now, Africa do have areas that's picked up like Botswana or Rwanda. Uh like they have areas that come up. But the question is with a lot of areas that get built up and the things that are known for like diamonds, particular pelts, things like that, like why is it they never really came up? Is it because Singapore has also come up, like I said, in the tech market rather okay, when Africa themselves is pretty much more construction? Like, I wonder if that's one of the causes, and I wonder if they're gonna mention it. And I don't even know. I should really go take a look at that.
experienced the indignities of being a British colony till as late as 1965. But within a few decades of being set free, it rose from its own ashes like the phoenix and set an example of how good planning and discipline can turn the tide for nations. This tiny country packs a powerful punch and is the third richest country in the world today, leaving behind even resource-rich Qatar in its dust. Its utopian present is far from its historical past, though. When it gained independence in 1965, only one half of its population was literate, and it had no natural resources to speak of. Taking on its challenges with sheer hard work and smart policymaking, Singapore transformed into an economic powerhouse, becoming one of the most business-friendly places in the world. Today, Singapore is a thriving trade, manufacturing.
But how though? H- How? Okay, so we're gonna have to do a little bit of diving. Hold on. Ask us some questions here. Whew. Let's see. Foreign direct investments, upgrades. They established a lot of trading hubs. Yeah, because it was already used for trade as well. So I guess they can already develop off of that business. Let's see. It's a staple of political environment. Favorable business conditions doesn't really say how with favorable business conditions. Well developed infrastructure. Hmm. So it looks like a lot of their industries are really structured around export. The most that I'm seeing is really structured around export. And their independence was only in 1965, as if Zaki said. I'm gonna do a little deep dive, and I tell you what, I'll do a little deep dive probably even after the show, and then if I find any significant materials that pretty much educate us on that, I'll also put that in the description as like I normally do. So let's find out what's going on here, or maybe they'll even explain it.
Manufacturing and financial hub, and 98% of its adult population is illiterate. Singapore made it. But why did Africa miss its Cinderella moment? To say that Africa is poor across the board would be a misrepresentation of the facts. Take Equatorial Guinea as an example. This jewel in the crown might be tiny, covering only around 10,830 square miles, but in terms of GDP per capita, it takes first place at 34,865. But this gem is not the only valuable piece in the crown of Africa. The tiny island country of the Seychelles is an amalgamation of 115 islands and has an even tinier population of 92,000 people, but it rakes in an astonishing $28,172 per capita, making it the second richest country in Africa. Its economy might be tourism-driven, with secondary sources of fishing and coconut byproducts, but Seychelles' success cannot be understated. Some experts even suspect that large offshore oil reserves are present within the nation's exclusive economic zone. But
Okay, I mean that definitely explains that they do have some resources that are still being able to be picked up, and it's something that can be used in terms of trade for commerce. So they're not totally off the mark. I'm just trying to figure out what was the development strategy. What was the development strategy that was in place that helped them make such significant growth when it comes to their isle versus this should have been something that was also should have been easier for. No, you know what? I think now we know Africa to be something more of trading post, but I don't really hear that well. I don't really hear a lot about particular areas really held up for trading. Maybe in the South, because you would figure what as big as a continent as Africa is, and they have such a large coastline, because just like us, they also have a large sea. But I never really hear about huge exports that are being dealt, especially on the sides of Africa, or the northern, or I would say the middle side of Africa. I think it's always more of the South, and I wonder why is that. Again, another question that's in my mind now that we got to turn around and look at. So we got to think of why is it there's not more trade from Africa, especially because they're the most resource intensive, I would say. And then also again Singapore, how did they come up within what were the two key points, two key strategies that they came up through their economics that made them so prominent right now, but that same development couldn't happen with Africa? Hmm.
Digging through the pearly sands of the island coastline is too risky to contemplate at the moment, even though its government is trying to shift away from its tourism dependence. If you're still not convinced, the examples of Mauritius, Gabon, and Botswana would make you a believer. Once again, the fact that Africa possesses some pretty rich countries show that overcoming a colonial history is not an impossibility, as the flourishing siblings of its poor nations have proven. So why have some African countries overcome the historical obstacles and risen above their circumstances, while others have fallen even further? For instance, the Central African Republic has consistently been ranked as not only the poorest country in the world, but the lowest in the Human Development Index, as well as the unhealthiest in the world for many years. So what are the other factors?
That's a shame. I mean, that's really, really sad. And we're talking about the central of Africa. So not too far from the south. We're talking about around equator lines. Like, why? Why is development just lacking so much? Why is it considered the most unhealthiest area of the land in such a resource intense country? Why is it they can't pull it together? Like, it's an education thing. Like, I can't imagine what. I mean, you look at it this way: their country is mainly, just to put it out there, black people who should be able to work together enough to become more industrialists and entrepreneurs. That actually, because I don't know much about their country when it comes to if they have an abundance of entrepreneurs, but there should be enough business out there to. Because they have cities, Most people don't think about it that way, but Africa has some cities, and I can't imagine that we still have, quote, well, not we, but why Africa has, quote, the lowest human development index and the unhealthiest in the world. It doesn't make a lot of sense. But you have to also look at the fact that there's also still people that live in tribes, like still using primitive weapons to go hunting and such. Why is that? Why is it they haven't picked up? There's so many questions. I get it if they want to live up the land, if they're purposefully doing that, but it makes me question: are they really purposely doing that? Are they just literally there are literally areas where people are just still off the grid because it's they're afraid of the change.
Factors that have created such a crisis-prone continent? And why has its developmental model diverged so spectacularly from the Asian model? After all, both continents share a sense of sisterhood in this post-colonial era. The roots of African poverty lie in its inability to feed itself. Where there is no food, there can only be survival or death. Ever heard of the saying, money begets money? Well, hunger begets hunger, making Africa's problem a vital one when it comes to the continent's development. Africa's hunger stems from its failure to catch up to the Green Revolution after its independence. Food security forms the backbone of economic opportunity and pays dividends as more and more people move away from subsistence farming to survive. Once agriculture is secured and the availability of food is ensured, labor and capital surpluses can then be used to generate and drive industrial and service investments, the two pillars of a strong economy. A study of the history of great states shows that no civilization had flourished for long.
Again, agriculture as big as their country is, agriculture should be a big thing. In fact, they should probably have the most farmers. They should have definitely a hell of a lot more farmers than most countries. I don't get it. I'm not. I don't. There's so many questions that's popping into my mind right now. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Yet, you know, they're digging for minerals of all types. They're digging. I don't understand. Animals are being hunted. Minerals are being dug, but they can't seem to get their politics in order. They can't seem to get apparently health and shit in order. They're very underdeveloped. That means again you have these few cities that are actually being put up, but majority of places are just probably pretty much run down. I'm not even gonna put that thought out there. I'm not gonna put that thought out here.
Without an effective strategy in place to gather, produce, or trade food in sufficient quantity and quality to ensure food availability, these food surpluses allowed nations to raise armies, build cities, and fill the state treasuries. As Slikker van Bath, the founding father of the new economic history in the Netherlands, eloquently puts it in his monumental piece, Agrarian History of Western Europe, the affluence we enjoy at present is rooted in millennia of agrarian change. Even the Asian continent took the same agrarian path to industrialization. The Industrial Revolution of the Asian Renaissance only came after serious growth in agricultural output and productivity. Within that period, the Philippines doubled its rice yields under the guidance of the International Rice Research Institute, established in 1960. The Suharto regime turned Indonesia into a rice exporter instead of an importer in just 10 years after the food crisis of the 1970s. Admittedly, certain sub-Saharan African countries are situated near the equator, thus being
Right.
prone to extreme climate and weather conditions like drought and floods that make agriculture next to impossible. This is offset by the example of India, which
But that's only some at that area of the equator. There's still other larger portions of Africa that are just not being used to its potential. Yes, I get it. Those are very, I would say, climate intense areas, big rainfalls, things like that. But there are Asian countries that also have huge rainfalls, and they're able to take. I mean, have you ever seen like the big rice plant? Like you could do that in Africa for sure. I mean, India has also taken, again, another Asian area, but India has taken advantage of that. I'm trying to understand why is it they didn't get their shit together. And you can even see up here in the corner, India. Like, how is it that Africa has not taken advantage of that? How is it know this time in the 21st century that it hasn't even been taught, that someone else hasn't come down to be able to bring that up?
which had been one of the most famine-prone regions of the world for centuries and had been the target of Malthusian doom scenarios predicted by social scientists in the late 1960s. But it wrote its own destiny through farming practices. Latin America saw the same agricultural revolution with the exponential rise in Mexican wheat and Brazilian maize exports. Africa didn't follow the same path as its Asian counterparts. While agricultural production did see some improvement, it failed to keep pace with its growing population. Instead, in most African countries, the per capita production of food slumped steadily from the 1960s through the 1990s. Alarmingly enough, as per FAO statistics, even today, some 30 out of 53 African countries produce less food per head of the population than they did in the early 1960s. Historically, food shortages happened
Less
because of
food.
climate shocks, disease epidemics, or military conflict. But in Africa, they occurred because local food demand did not match up with its supply. As a direct result, whereas before, famines had been the destiny of Asian countries until the 1960s, they increasingly became the fate of Africa. Yet another reason could be that individual land holdings in Africa are rare. As the continent is predominantly made up of tribal societies, the land is subject to tribal ownership. Most of Africa does not
So they weren't able to develop, I guess, borderlines for states. And I guess like tribes can get together to build like, because like no, they don't have colonies, they don't have. I don't understand how these ideas like to this day are just they're so difficult. How is it that how is it that every other country and their cultures are able to segment portions of the land, able to create states, able to create parishes and other provinces, but for some reason this became a big issue when it came to Africa. Why is it they couldn't get it together?
not have an established system of freehold landowning. In some countries on the continent, the laws actually prevent people from disadvantaged groups from owning land, while legal title to the land is not assured. As a result, locals in rural Africa are mostly small-scale farm laborers who rarely have the luxury of a clear title to their own land. Unused land is plentiful, but it's often private property. In the absence of land registration systems, squatting and land theft have become common. Such a state of affairs is not conducive to large-scale agriculture and farming. The result is that according to statistics, 70% of the population is not getting enough to
What's
eat.
good?
The World Bank has gone as far as to advocate for a doubling of food aid over the next decade. Less than a handful
Yo,
of countries
what's
like
going on, man?
Zimbabwe and Malawi can feed themselves. Meanwhile, Nigeria, once Africa's largest exporter of food, has become its largest importer. So, why did Asian governments decide to channel substantial public resources into the development of rural
I'd love to
infrastructure and
know.
credit facilities? They not only subsidized and coordinated technical support to farmers, but they protected this embryonic industry by educating the farmers on the best agricultural practices.
And that was exactly what I was just saying a moment. That's exactly what I was just saying. I don't understand why a such resource intense area like Africa, continent as Africa, compared to such a smaller region like Singapore, could not take advantage of all of the resources that they had, could not take advantage of all the agriculture that they had, could not find a way to manage so much more areas. They talk about the how climate heavy it is, especially around the equator, but you have so much land that goes from beyond that below the equator. Let's be honest. A good chunk of Africa is taken up by the Sahara Desert. It's just not land that you can really use. But from everything on the eastern side and even down, no, I mean, a lot of people don't even talk about that. And yes, there's lots of areas that have been divvied up over time by other countries. But the fact that things like rice, things like food, are not considered resources that should be imported a lot when it comes to Africa instead of just all these damn minerals. I don't understand why they were not able to ever pick it up. Now, their own government, crazy enough, because Singapore was able to do it, banks were able to do it, the systems in the government were able to do it to actually, again, self develop their own nation, giving their people resources and giving them access to be able to help build and actually sending people to them to help them learn the trade so that they can be able to make better strides. How is it that something that just could not be manufactured over in Africa, especially when you have so many people, right? You have so many people who quote will go to like areas in Europe, in America, learn all this different stuff, and then come back to Africa and then they don't use it. And I think part of the reason is because they don't go in for agriculture or things like that, or they don't even go in to these other westernized areas and then go back to the land. I think they stay. So if it's not a matter of learning about business and such, I don't think they really stay. And it, to be honest, the ideal of being influenced by Western civilization, I don't think it becomes very appealing for people to want to go back to quote save their own country. And again, I'm just spitballing. That's just a quick feeling that I have in my mind. If there's anyone who would come from those areas and you think you have a better reason or a different reason for that, sure, let me know. We can definitely have a talk about that. CCD, you said guessing here, but maybe it's Africa, it's like Afghanistan. It's easier to move because actually it's not easy to move. A lot of Africans are having to find desperate ways to have to move. I mean, here's a great example of that. CCD. A good example of that is because because it's so difficult for young people to even get work or stuff like that. Think of all the areas they have to travel to. They have to try to hoof it to find ways to get to Europe, to find ways to get on small boats to be able to travel across seas just to try to make it. A great example is the immigration that we have right now, because a lot of them coming from Africa. That if they're lucky, if they survive small boats, it's not like they're getting on big cruise liners or whatever, or big oil tankers to make it all the way to America. They're getting on small little frigates or whatever and hoping that that shit doesn't capsize and they drown in the sea. Then they have to make it over to areas like Nicaragua or whatever and then walk their asses up. And then on top of that, let's just say it wasn't before that when they had to take themselves north to try to get to Europe, right? Areas like trying to cross like Afghanistan to try to cross Iran and Iraq to like you know how many people will pick these people up and then sell them off to slavery? You get sold. You get caught trying to just travel to all these different areas. It's not like Egypt is a African intense area. No, it's an Arab world now. So you being on your own trying to just hoof it, which is far by the way, a longer travel to try to get there is it's not feasible, it's not smart. So it's either those two desperate attempts or you stay your ass where you're at, You do your best and you scrounge up your little bit of money and you send one person across seas, most likely on a plane, so that they're the ones who can then work their asses off to hopefully make something of themselves so that they can bring you, bring their family, bring their friends, bring whatever. This is the things that we already see people in Asia do when they're here. They build a business or they work whatever and they bring family members over, or they, like I said, they build a business, and what they do is that they send their little ones to school and they bring someone else over. It's the same thing for African families, except for the fact that in Asia, it's easier for them to migrate because they don't go through the same struggles as people in Africa. They have more resources. They did better after being able to trade. After uh um after Shanghai was basically given back to them, they did well. It's not the same for Africa at all. I mean, what prominent cities do you hear about that had done boost up? In all our time with all of our different cultures and different countries, who knows of a place that's a tech city in Africa? Name one. Name a tech city in Africa. We can name one for Japan. We can name one in Russia. We can name one in Europe. We can name one in Asia. We can name one, hell, in India. We can't really name one for Africa though. At least I can't think of one in Africa. If you know one, let me know. And again, they just have so much land that I just don't understand how, with all those people, they weren't able to get together to make it happen. It's kind of crazy.
making seeds and fertilizers available, and going so far as to offer tax exemptions. This proves that the governments in Asia realized the need for food security and took all the steps to ensure it. Why did their African counterparts not do the same? Early independent African states were faced with multiple problems, like fiscal underdevelopment and dysfunctional bureaucracies, leading to shoddy economic policymaking. Still, African nations are not the only ones dealing with a lack of natural resources, famines, and a faulty government, as well as a bureaucratic setup. Take Pakistan, for
Yeah,
example.
India,
Born
exactly.
with a hodgepodge of population, rife with divides across tribal and sectarian lines, made worse by dysfunctional bureaucracy. It became a food exporter a few decades after its birth. It's clear that something else was at work in Africa, and it definitely derailed the process of a green revolution there, with devastating
So we're back now to the same question that we started out with. What's so different from the way how Singapore was colonized, from the way how Shanghai, also about Hong Kong, Shanghai, whatever, was colonized, from the way how India was colonized, that when they left all these other areas, these places exploded after being freed. But for Africa, didn't work that way. What's so special about, and again, a larger continent? And India is pretty damn big. They're just referencing Pakistan, but India itself is really large. Singapore is really small in comparison to both India and, of course, Africa. But yet, no development could take place in Africa. And even when you turn around and look at numbers now, black people, if we're talking about just black people in general, no specific demographic, no specific area, is still a large amount of people compared to other ethnicities, and they couldn't make it happen. I'm not one for conspiracies, but I find it really weird, especially when we talk about, things like, you want to talk about the old stuff, right? The things that people say, like they have the Moors, African people, of course, were already sailing and shit like that before Caucasus people showed up, all this stuff. But yet there's this big hit to development. Now I understand how they can get there early, because there's an old thing where basically you need people in order to help build societies. And if you're selling off people, they're your slaves. But if you're selling off people, that's left for you to have people who are resource intensive to be able to help build and develop land. But then after, when the nations were freed and slavery wasn't a thing, because that was happening across multiple countries, that was happening across the globe. Why didn't the pickup happen? Okay, people weren't slaves anymore. We can start building our shit. Why is it that didn't start happening? That we can still say to this day, they are underdeveloped and they're still they're still to this day one of the most unhealthiest areas in the globe. It doesn't make sense. It really does not. If they did, I mean, but okay, here's the point in that, right? It wouldn't be hard to do because why? Other countries have already done it. If they didn't even want to go to America, right? Say America too far. What is this? I'm not going to America too far. They could have learned it in Asia and both any area of Asia, because part of the issue with the water when you were mentioning the resources for water in their farmland that they're having a problem developing is that look at Asia. They also go through heavy rainfall, but they're able to maintain their rice production. The same thing for India. They have heavy rainfall. And in fact, they got disgusting rivers and water over there. And yet they're able to do a big rice production. They can manage their exports. But for some reason, and again, when you look at Africa, I'm not Africa, when you look at India and you look at Asia, think of the large amount of land, then think of where is the sea for trade. They have to go past other places. Africa itself has a large body of water. Why aren't they more known for large trade? Why aren't they really known for large seaports to being able to have mass trade? Because they have big sections of bodies of water. It doesn't make sense. Something's not adding up. I'm not really getting it right now. Yeah, again, as far as minerals go, yes, they are making a well, they're supposed to be making a killing. They're not. They're so resource intensive when it comes to minerals, but Africa has more than minerals. They have a great area. They could have, or rather, they should have a great area for food production because when it comes to meats, when it comes to the fashion industry, where you think are they getting all their shit? Yes, there's a lot of people that's making fake shit, especially over in like Indonesia and China, whatever. But if you want authentic shit, you gotta get it from the source of where the animals are still at. That's Africa. That is Africa. There's still got people out there, still out there in the crazy areas, still trying to poach illegally, and no one is able to build anything to build a better area, to build better cities. Where are your cities? Where are why is it still to this day you're not really hearing about like you hear Africa and then you hear about all these little countries. It's not like you hear Africa and then you hear states. Er, There are plenty of areas, just like they mentioned earlier in this, that be, people can't even decide who owns land because they're still disputing over shit that happened a long time ago when it came to being tribes. So because they can't even dispute the land, it's easy to take it from them. It's uncontested because they're too busy bickering among each other still to this day to say who can own the land. So they can't even develop their land because, quite frankly, it can't even be determined who owns it. That's hard. That's a hard thing to still have to go through.
Consequences for the continent's people. One important contributing factor that also impedes Africa's development into a thriving economy is the location of the continent's landmass. Hard to believe that, when it's blessed with an abundance of minerals and rare earth metals crucial to the electrification of the world. Yet for a people to be able to benefit from the treasures of its land, far more than just abundance is required. How and where a continent is positioned on the world map has multiple consequences on it being able to feed itself. The availability of water and fertile land, and the availability of viable trade routes. But where Africa's geography has blessed it with untold riches, it's also made it more difficult for its people to benefit from it. The Sahara Desert has isolated
I
Africa
agree with
from
that.
the well-established trading routes between Europe, the Middle East, and Asia, making it easier for its north to benefit
they have
in
the
terms
sea.
of development, while the south and the center cannot reap any of those benefits. The Sahara Desert cuts across the African continent so effectively that social scientists look at the North and Sub-Saharan Africa as two separate entities instead of one. This not only impacted the development of trade avenues, but also social mingling and the development of political thought and statehood. It left the South more open to exploitation as compared to the North. Africa sits at the juncture of the world.
And just think of this: if Africa got its shit together, the same way how we say we have in the U.S. we have the thing that makes us safe for a lot of different areas is that we have two large bodies of water. If Africa really had set themselves up early from all this shit, not only would they would have had a large body of water on one side and a smaller body of water on the other side, but they would have had a large from coast to coast of desert. Even if your enemies managed to get to you, they had to get past the grueling hot sands in the daytime and the cold shivers at night. Becau- Anyone I know that's been in the desert areas will tell you that it's a fucking shit hell cold at nighttime and it's burning up damn crazy in the daytime. That would have been a great border. And for some reason, the ball was dropped. The ball was absolutely dropped.
World, which is a victim of inconsistent rainfall. It seems the continent is slated to become the latest victim of climate change, as rain has steadily declined since the 1960s in some places, but has increased where it shouldn't. In fact, if rainfall didn't recede, the gap in African GDP per capita as compared to the rest of the world would decline by about 15 to 40%. That's compounded by the fact that Africa has the largest share of landlocked countries in the world, which face higher costs in trade and transportation.
So I'm also thinking about that the huge rainfall that this had, right? Because I'm still going on the fact that we're not talking about the 19th century. We're talking about this century. They couldn't make big greenhouse environments to be able to take care of or minimize the heavy rainfall that would destroy crops. Like, why is it technology today is not being utilized, especially by the people who actually know that land? It's racking my brain. It really is right now. There's too many excuses because everything I can look at says that there are lots of that somebody should have been making a killing. Not talking about for blood diamonds. Somebody should have made a killing off of being able to develop areas. They could have started the state and owned that shit. You could have owned yourself an entire state because it just would have been easy to just develop. And we have the resources. Companies could have come together because we got no problem going into other people's countries to use resources and to swindle them out of shit or whatever. But to develop and say we own this area now, and you would say no, we can't do that because it's colonizing. I mean, quite frankly, it's kind of being stated at least to them that this is part of the reason that they're in it. But they've been free for so long. I gotta question it. Is Africa poor due to colonization? Some people are still saying yes. I'm pretty sure that even the same way how we still have people in the US here and black people who turn around and say that we're still under slavery, I'm pretty sure that they're gonna have people over there that still says that they're still colonized. I'm almost positive of that there's still gonna be people who say it. I don't know. Don't quote me on it yet.
This observation by Ten Mang and Dwayne Woods in their study of economic growth in Africa sums it up best. Geography is most favorable to economic production for Europe, next to America, then to Asia, and least favorable to Africa. If it were not for the unfavorable fiscal environment, African countries would be better off economically than South America.
But it's just in one region. That is just on the line of the equator. That says nothing about the south of Africa. It's yes, outside of the rainforest. There's so much more land. It's not like everything covering the south end of Africa is just fucking rainforest. You have you have land. Case in point, if Brazil on the other side of the country, below the equator, is able to grow resources and able to export, There's no reason why Africa couldn't do it. That area is below the equator. That's a bad excuse.
American countries. Even if it's not landlocked, the soil in the south and the center of the huge continent is completely infertile and non-agricultural.
How?
These circumstances did not turn African society into an agricultural society. Tilling such land would have been a nightmare, as even today, it requires the latest farming technologies to make it conducive to
Which
agriculture.
we have.
The reality raised to the ground any possibility of Africa reaching food self-sufficiency. It seems the continent was geographically cursed to forego an agricultural base, but that arid landscape has not been utilized adequately in the soil-rich north either. Once again,
Well, you know what
whether
that's
a
being
land
used
is
for.
gifted with fertile soil, blessed with the ability to produce juicy produce, or it's blessed with vast mineral treasures, political leadership is the one factor that plays a decisive role in how a country will turn out. The biggest impediment to Africa's growth stems from a lack of good governance.
They
While
dug a big
Africa's
hole in the middle
colonial
of your
past
country.
might have contributed in part to its present ills, the governmental system was the domain of African society and had to bow to prevalent social makeup. Unfortunately, the African state system has been based on monarchical absolutism, and much like its European cousins, African kings enjoyed absolute control over their subjects. For example, the experience of the Ethiopians under King Azana of Aksum is a tale of the king lording over his subjects with absolute power. In this African dynamic, the emperor enjoyed complete control over a subject's property and lands, bestowing land upon the subject through a system called gult. At the death of a subject, instead of the land going to the descendants, it subverted to the emperor and became his property. The emperor also had the right to confiscate any property and wealth from a subject.
That means he took the women and children, y'all. He took the women and children, most likely put the children in the military, or if not, have them already cut off entirely. Took the women and did whatever he wanted. And there were plenty of people like that all over the world. People who rule with an iron fist or just ruled with complete gluttony in the heart. I mean, he was one of many. He was one of many. But again, that's still the past. Many moons ago. It doesn't speak to how the people are still in this predicament now today.
As and when needed. Not only that, but the emperor controlled trade with an iron fist. The case of Africa diverges from that of Europe, though, as Europe broke away from its absolutist tendencies eventually. Africa not only remained steadfast in the clutches of absolute rule, but it also became more extreme in some areas. The presence of a robust slave trade might have been a great way to create a steady cash flow, but the entire trade was run under the interest of the same emperor. From war tributes to making a small mistake to committing serious crimes, subjects landed on the selling block at the drop of a hat. Norms of statehood and a lively political culture could not thrive under those circumstances, and the newly birthed nations developed institutional dysregulation due to a lack of development in political thought. With this lack of social development, Africa entered a period of intense exploitation due to direct foreign occupation. In direct reaction to Western capitalism, Africa's anti-colonial leadership eventually identified strongly with Marxism. After independence, Africa's anti-colonial resistance claimed allegiance to Marx. The continent's political leaders ended up adopting either Lenin's teachings or their own African socialism. The African political elite found affinity with Karl Marx
Huh.
because of the mistrust they had inherited from their colonial past, the trauma of Western pillaging they'd experienced,
Nothing
kept them
Western.
leery of any Western overtures, even though Africa greatly benefited from Western business and trade with it in the immediate aftermath of getting their independence. This mistrust, combined with how well the Soviet Union was doing, made them more inclined.
So they didn't want to trust anything when it came to Westerners because of how they were treated. All these years later, and they're behaving like Westerners. I mean, the language is still there. Quote, the religion is pretty much gone, it's replaced because it's heavily Christian based. Um, and they still run off of quote governments. But I just don't understand how they're still so far behind in development and mindset because the fact of the matter that we still have quote rebel armies taking over villages, dragging people out, raiding. When I see them dudes still driving in them old ass, Ford trucks with the oldest of AKs, like it drives me nuts. Like, how is it these guys are not handled already? I just don't get it.
Inclined to move toward their own brand of socialism. This meant that most African Marxists of the era were now in government and presiding over the very
Which did not help them. It did not help them, and it just became more people who tried to vie for power, and it was just a terrible idea for them. They didn't do it. They didn't do a good job. They still haven't done a good job, and it's just gonna turn around and keep biting them in the ass. That's the way I see it. That's the way it's been running, and they're not gonna convince me otherwise. They're really, really not at all. So Jordan Peterson was interviewing this. I forgot her name already. It's probably written up here. Uh, Magatte Wade, I believe her name is, and apparently, people might have a problem with her, and so Jordan Peterson was interviewing her. This is a short video, and the title of this is "Africa is not poor because of colonization." So apparently, she has the exact same title. Oh, well, I had a question mark in mind, but apparently, she has. There's a big. They have the same, pretty much the same title.
Well, you list here in one of your articles where you make reference to these rating systems, the bottom 10 countries for doing business in the world: Chad, Haiti, Central African Republic, Congo, Democratic Republic, South Sudan, Libya, Yemen, Venezuela. There's a lovely example: Eritrea and Somalia. And so there are three exceptions in the African ecosystem. Mauritius, Rwanda, Kenya, South Africa, Botswana, and Zambia. You pointed out in your
Those are the big ones.
Is it prospectus article?
Prospectus article of Artbridge Institute.
Right. That Mauritius is a rising star, and Rwanda is in some ways comparable to Georgia. So some of these countries have started to get this right.
Yes.
And so what's the consequence of that? And what does right mean?
What they have understood, what these countries have understood, is that economic freedom is at the center for prosperity building. Rwanda, for example, Paul Kagame, the president of Rwanda, is explicit about it. He said he wants to be the Lee Kuan Yew he wants to be the Singapore of Africa, and Lee Kuan Yew is his model. Now, the dirty mouths are gonna start shouting, "Oh yeah, see, authoritarian, blah, blah, blah." Whatever. Me, I wanna talk only about the on the economic side.
If that's his motto, because you already seen that it worked. I mean, they were able to get themselves out. Like I said, Singapore is a big technical giant right now. A lot of companies are actually being put in there. Oh wait, what am I? Here's a good example of that. The guy who, well, I don't think it's a Singapore. No, it's not. It's Chinese. But the guy who runs TikTok, he's Singaporean. He runs TikTok. I believe he's the CEO. Like, there's a big connection with a lot of people that's just handling technology when it comes to being out in Singapore. Whether it comes to export, whether it's becoming that kind of trade, importing out, and also for tech. If this guy is this guy is talking about saying he wants to become the Singapore of that because he wants Africa to move. Since all the tech is being built with all their materials anyway, I don't see that being a bad thing. I really don't.
If you take Lee Kuan Yew and Singapore as your example, then it means that, like him, you're gonna have to be serious about economic freedom. And that's exactly what he did. That's what Singapore did. When Singapore figured that out, they went on to put in the right reforms to make their environment some of the most business-friendly environments in the world, one of the most free markets environment in the world, and you saw the magic of Singapore. Today, Singapore is richer than its ex-colonizer, Great Britain. So when I hear people telling me today, "Oh, Africa is poor because of colonization," I'm like, please, let's move on from that. Does it have maybe a tiny percentage in where we are today? Maybe, and I don't know. But I know it's not the cause. Because if it were, many countless countries have been colonized before. And by the way, colonizing one another is humanity's history. It just happened that maybe Africa has been one of the last, colonized region in the world. So in our psyche, it is there, and it acts like nothing happened before to others. But flash news, it's the history of the world. We've been capturing each other back and forth, all of that. So
So she's not wrong about that. She's not wrong about that. It's happened all across the board. Many people were freed at many different times, and I think that it's funny that she says a couple of things that makes me think about how um blacks in the country that we have in our country that we're in now, how some of them look at particular things. Now, I can already tell it right off the bat. She probably pissed a lot of people off by saying, by trying to rather dismiss, I guess, colonization. I can see why that might rub people the wrong way because when she said it, a flag went off in my head, like, oh shit, like that's gonna get somebody mad. But I think the overall arching message is the most important one to say that if you're going to be able to want to build up your culture, to build up your country, to do better, to be able to quote compete on a larger scale, you're going to have to let go of grudges in order for the benefit of not just you, but also for those who are going to show up after you. You gotta be able to put some shit to the side. You can dislike them, but the idea of being upfront and so vocal, or pissing at their feet, and yet at the same time wanting them to do something for you just doesn't work. You need to grit your teeth, shut the fuck up, and then just do the work. I think that's really what it's gonna have to come down to. And that sentiment that I just said right there will rub people the wrong way. It really will. And I that's a process, a mindset that I hold for not just in my assessment of what's going on with Africa, but that's my assessment when it comes to a lot of people. You're going to run across people that you don't like. There are going to be some people that did you wrong, but I think the most important part is not about the fact that something happened to you, but it's your response to it. Sometimes you're gonna have to just sit there, grit your fucking teeth, and get over it, and do what you got to do to get by. Because what was saying by Frank Sinatra, the best revenge is massive success. You're gonna have to push through it. That's just the best way I look at it.
Anyway, but the truth is, Singapore, richer than Great Britain today. And then Hong Kong happened. And then because Hong Kong happened, China even today happened. Because China's like, wait a minute, what
I said that.
went on over there? And then China went on to do the exact same thing with its SEZs, the special economic zones, some of the most free market zones in the world. And then look at it happen in communist China, who, when it comes to economics, decided that we're going to do the free market, we're going to be capitalist, because that's the only way. We tried everything else. We killed hundreds of millions of people, and we have nothing to show for it. But now that we're tired of being disrespected members of society, because guess what? That's the other thing too. You want to be respected in this world? You're going to have to be among the prosperous ones for other reasons. Would it be nice, G, that we respect people just because? Absolutely. But that's really not the world we live in. So when China got tired of being disrespected, they're like, maybe we got to build also some prosperity here because then they're going to hear us. And today, China, being one of the, being where it is at, even Hollywood, who tries to tell the world how to think, is being told by China what movies to make and how to tweak stories and history in order to be palatable for them.
And if they don't like the movie, they ban it. Never to be seen in their country. She's not lying about that. Not even a little bit. Till this day, China does it. North Korea has been known to do it. And actually, North Korea, I don't even know if they really get an influx of movies. But I know for sure China does that. China does that. There are some movies in India, even, I believe that they do that. So, yeah, she's not lying about that at all. And I think it does take an aggressive stance to be able to move forward if you're going to have benefits. I said it before.
You see the power that comes with being prosperous.
The Consumer Price Index has reached yet another 40-year high, and the latest GDP numbers confirm that the United States is in a recession. Now is not the time to have all your money in the stock market or
to get the hell out of the way, let's say, of the people who would, like you, would do everything they could to try to make it better. I mean, one of the things that happened with India is India established the Indian Institute of Technology, which is a deadly engineering school. And a huge number of its graduates went to Silicon Valley, as you well
Scammers.
know. And many of the successful Indian graduates of IIT
I
started to
kid.
dump money back into India and build a capitalist infrastructure there, or help build a capitalist infrastructure there. So this sort of thing can really take hold. If you were making recommendations to governments who wanted to get on board and stop being like Chad, Haiti, Central African Republic, Congo, South Sudan, Libya, Yemen, and Venezuela, etc., what concrete steps should they take from the bottom up to get the hell out of the way?
Exactly. So two things we've been doing, because
That's a good question.
I'm a practitioner, as that's my entrepreneurial journey. I'm an entrepreneur, so I practice what I preach, but I also preach. I preach for free markets, and so when it comes to that, I'm one of the hats that I wear is as the director for the African Center for Prosperity of the Atlas Network, the largest organization in the world of free market think tanks around the world. And so what we do there is we work on reforms around the world to take down barriers of entry for local entrepreneurs. So that's one thing. But as we all know, that's a great initiative to take, and we've been making some really good advances in many countries, especially in Ghana. We've been making a lot of progress with our partners there, Imani. But that is piecemeal legislation. It takes forever. It is hard as heck. And by the time you made a gain here, you made 20 losses over there, and it's a continuous problem. But until we get better, we got to continue at it. So that's one thing we've been doing. And so that's a hat I wear.
That's gonna take you a very, very long time. Um, that's something that might even take a whole 2 generations, you know. But if you're setting up things for the future of people, I don't necessarily see that as a bad thing. So she might be onto something. She's being rather secretive about the company that she's working with. Mainly probably 'cause they just didn't agree yet, or rather, she doesn't want them to because then people can block her. Okay.
Working with free market think tanks to try to make it easier for local entrepreneurs to join in the party. Additionally, I'm going bold, I'm going radical. For the past few years, we've been advocating an idea for Africa that found some of its roots in Latin America. And again, I'm related to the people who are involved in this. My husband being one of the key figures in this movement, a movement called the Charter Cities. Paul Romer calls it like that. He's a Nobel laureate in economics. Others call it the free cities. I like to call it the startup cities. So the best way to think about it, Jordan, and it goes back to what you were talking about earlier when you use the word operating software. Most of the most of the low-income nations, so meaning back in the days, the way we used to call it is poor nations, they have regulations for poverty. They're basically regulated for poverty, meaning the laws, the set of law, poverty. It only calls poverty. And so what some of these folks have thought about, looking at the Dubai example, Dubai just recently entered the top 10 of international financial centers of the world. And what Dubai did at some point.
Yo, I don't even know how Dubai escaped my mind. That's an area that was pretty much open. It was just open desert. And look what it got turned into. Through just straight up investments. She's 1000% right. I don't even know how I did not think about Dubai. That is crazy. I don't know how that's my mind, but she's absolutely right. And again, they still had to get the resources from somewhere, which most likely came from Africa. That's wild. I mean, I think it's a little weird that, she's working with her husband on particular stuff. It seems like money's still going to be coming back to the family household. But, it's the price of business.
Point is, think about it and be like, on this bare, plot of sand that's technically worth nothing right now as is, this 110 acres of land, sand everywhere. They're like, well, maybe Sharia law is not the best for business. We got to think about better set of laws for business. We're talking only about business, not family law, not anything else but business. And they decided there's got to be something better. And so they looked around, and that's actually when to take one of the terms you used earlier, they're starting to realize, common law is actually a better way for business, specifically British common law. So at that point, and I'm oversimplifying here because otherwise we can totally geek out on it. Remember, this is like one of my latest things that I've been involved in.
Wait, is she talking about introducing British common law in the design of her of quote liberating areas of Africa? We just saw in our own videos that pretty much some of the things they pushed away from was essentially, yeah, it's because here's another thing. I think it's because Africa did not embrace quote the West, which is why they deal with a lot of dysfunction that they have right now. But the idea that she wants to now bring that to them, I think that may not have worked before. I don't know how well it would work now because you'd have to find a really strong investment strategy to be able to show that and to be able to show those margins work quickly. Especially during a time right now where Africans are fleeing to try to get to other areas. Oh, you say she got a small neck? She probably does. That's why she got that scarf, trying to hide it, trying to go through the illusion that she has more going on there. I don't know if it's that small. I don't know if it's that small. But she got a small head, but she got a small neck.
Latest, it's been the past 10 years, and I'm going to share with you a win. So Dubai is like, we have to adopt British, common law, primarily British common law. We're going to hire retired British common law judges to come and educate the law here, train our own people, and that, along with many other reforms, to also become a top center when it comes to the and in the free market when it comes to the finances. Dubai.
Yeah, well, that British common law system. So it's very, very interesting theologically and metaphysically. So it's predicated on the idea that every individual has all the rights that there are, except for those that are specifically regulated and limited by legal necessity. And then generally that realm of necessity has emerged only as a consequence of disputes between people. So you're free to do whatever you want unless you have a dispute with someone else. Then the dispute is adjudicated according essentially to constitutional and theological principles, and then a precedent is established. And then the whole body of law built up that body of precedents.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's bottom up, not top down.
It's totally
and
that.
English common law is a gift from God, man.
No,
it's something else.
Absolutely. And that's the key word there when you said bottom up. So common law is so much better for bottom up approaches. And we all know that markets work better in a bottom up approach. And also, when they have to educate the law and resolve a dispute, they're going to be much more respectful to the contract that was passed between the two parties than, say, civil law would be, right? And so anyway, so from this standpoint here, you have Dubai who's now trying to put all of this together, and eventually they put a set of laws together that would now be conducive to being a top international financial center in the world. And voila, in less than a generation, in less than 25 years, Dubai
came
completely unrecognizable.
Yep. I agree. I cannot disagree with that whatsoever. Dubai did came up. I don't even know why they did not cross my mind at all. At all. Not even a little bit, which should have actually come up, but it didn't. So that was the interview that she did with Jordan Peterson. That was just a snippet of the interview. But she also did an interview recently. Well, I won't say recently, 6 months ago, because that interview with Jordan Peterson was actually a year back. And let's just see. Damn it! It seemed like we all got the same title. Africa is not, she goes, NOT, really in caps, poor because of colonization. And she puts, here's why. All right, let's take a look at this one. Oh, it seems like there's a lot because this is from Triggernometry. So I'm gonna jump around because I have a feeling they're gonna talk about a whole bunch of stuff. They're very wordy on Triggernometry because they like to get people's backgrounds and all kind of other stuff.
Is Africa poor because of colonialism?
Resounding no. The solution to poverty is prosperity. Then who and how do we build prosperity? It's entrepreneurs, right? They always have two companies, one in
She's
the
covering
in
her
Africa
neck again,
and one
OG.
in the US. And to see that one almost took 2 years, the other one barely 20 minutes to put together.
Why is it so overregulated, though?
Because once upon a time, we drank the fateful, ill-advised, dreadful, deadly ideology of socialism.
Oh my God, great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me, both of you.
One of the questions that has been suggested to us because we obviously ask our fans, etc., what we should talk about is colonialism and Africa. This is something you talk about a lot. Is Africa poor because of colonialism?
Resounding no. It's not. I mean, think about it. People like, when you line up, you could line up 100 people, African, non-African, doesn't matter, and you start asking questions, and you might probably get 100 different answers, but you can pretty much categorize. I told you, English is only my fourth language, so some of these words I don't know how to pronounce. Yeah. You can put it into categories, let's say that. And some people anywhere, so the people who are, some people will be like on the IQ thing, lazy thing, that whole racist trend of why Africans are where they are today. And then you have, and then you have...
You sounded like you've done a lot of research into this.
I grew up in South London, mate. I've met a few.
Right? And so on the other end, you have Africans and their allies, so-called allies. And for them, it's all various forms of victimhood, anywhere from... It's because of racism. It's because, we've been colonized. It's because they're stealing our natural resources. You hear all of that. Yet, I don't hear anyone talking about what's the reason why we're still poor. And so, what do I mean by that? Think about it. We are talking about poverty. You asked me the question, is Africa poor today because of colonialism? You said poverty. You didn't say anything else. Poverty.
Well, then the answer is going to be yes, and I don't think that anyone would disagree with that. Like Africa is absolutely not doing well because of poverty, for sure. But the question is, how does one get themselves out of poverty? Right? You need to have you either have to move, take your chances somewhere else, or your nation needs to have some sort of a stable economic system in place to be able to help you come up with the resources to be able to get yourself out of poverty. But when you have large pockets, we're talking about a large continent in poverty, what do you do about that? What exactly is going to be your solution?
What's the solution to poverty? Isn't it prosperity? It's not poverty alleviation. Like this idea that I should just be happy being a little bit less poor, but it's pathetic. So the solution to poverty is prosperity. Then who and how do we build prosperity? It's entrepreneurs, right? Traditionally, any nation that you look at, it's entrepreneurs that did it. Well, what do entrepreneurs need in order to thrive? They need an enabling business environment.
Okay.
And we find that actually countries that offer their citizens a world-class business environment are rich. Conversely, those who offer a pretty bad, poor business environment don't thrive.
You're talking about corruption.
Well, no, not exactly corruption. It's a pile of different things. So I could walk you into all of this. For example, take my country, Senegal. When I started my first company back in 2003, so at that point, when you wanted to start a company, you have to register the business, first of all. How long would it take back in the days? Almost 2 years to register the business legally. And you look at that and you thought about the sister company.
That's
because I always have two companies, one in Africa and one in the US, they're sister companies. And to see that one almost took 2 years, the other one barely 20 minutes to put together. In this instance, you're married to your employees for good or for bad. Over here, employment at will, and so on and so forth. It's about everything like that. Everything. If I want to hire you, if I want to hire you, Francis, the deal is simple. I show up, we write a contract, done. You put it in your drawers, I put it in my drawers, we're done. But in Senegal, I want to hire Constantin. We're over there talking to each other. I have to get a contract in 3 examples. Take myself physically to a government office called Inspection du Travail, where we meet with a government official who doesn't know the first thing about my business, probably never ran a business in his whole darn life, probably maybe never was in the private sector, has no idea what we're doing, doesn't even know where we are, but this person gets to decide if Constantin and I get to work together or not. And he says, well, where is his
And I wonder, where did that come from? Who put that into place? I mean, and what was the origin? What was the mindset to put that kind of clause in place that two people just can't do business with each other? That she couldn't just hire employees, well, as she stated, at will. She has to go to someone else in order to hire someone for her business. That's crazy. I've never heard of that practice. I mean, it's one thing if you draw a contract and then you want to take it to your own people, like your own lawyer or whatever, to have a review to see if there's any changes that need to be made or a different negotiation needs to be made. But just to hire somebody, that's it's a little wild.
health certificate showing me that he is apt to do the job. See, this type of nonsense, when you put all of this together, that's what the economists call economic freedom. And that's also what we call the business environment. Technically, how free or not are you to enterprise? How free or not are you to run the business?
Perhaps,
And so when you
perhaps.
realize that Africa is the region in the world that's the most overregulated region in the world, that's the one that offers its entrepreneurs the least freedom to enterprise, then you understand why we're poor. Poverty solved by prosperity, prosperity built by entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs need a business class business environment.
So that would explain, well, that I won't say explain, but that's a reason that would answer one of my questions. So why exactly you have people that leave to go to westernized world to learn business and to learn everything else, and then to go back to Africa? Why is it they're not able to just build businesses, hire people? They learn the system so that they can be able to help do changeover in lands that would be prosperous. And it's because you have all these additional steps in government that make the process of just being able to get a business started and even hire the right kind of people fucking insane. Like, literally, they have system in place to stagnate you. That's also a. I'm not saying that's the only reason, but that's a good reason to hold somebody back, to hold a nation back. You said state mafia, yeah, pretty much. That's crazy. That sucks. That really sucks.
Happens to be that in Africa, they have the worst business environments in the world. You haven't looked there, and you want to sit there and scream about all of these so-called reasons as to why we're supposedly poor? Give me a break. Give me a break. So this is what we have found, and that's what we need to work on, and no one is working on it, because those 100 people I told you about, you line them up, you ask them why we're poor, none of them speaks about the shackles that are around my neck as an entrepreneur trying to do business underground. Good luck with that.
Why is it so overregulated, though?
Because once upon a time, we drank the fateful, ill-advised, dreadful, deadly ideology of socialism.
And the reason I asked about corruption earlier is I know
Yeah.
from Russia, for example,
Yeah.
where it's not as bad in
Yeah.
terms of regulations, etc. But the reason that these restrictions and these apparatchiks and these bureaucrats exist to get involved in your business is because they get to exercise power
Yeah.
over a business.
Yes.
And then they can say, well, I could look at this letter
Yeah.
now, I could look at it 3 weeks from now.
Exactly.
And that depends on whether you
Exactly.
want to.
That would make sense. It would make sense, and that's why I'm happy. I just kind of clicked over looking at corruption and other symptoms of poverty, because I do think that if you do have places that are just all about having bribes, that's a strong contributor to it. You know, Especially if they already expect you to have money, because quite frankly, you're walking into a Nate. I hate to say this. It's so weird to say this. You're walking into an entire continent. You're walking into a nation that is quote poor. It is weird to say that like Africa is a poor nation. It is just it's crazy to say, but it's a lot. It's a lot and then people are asking for dollars to be able to take those resources for you to try to get started on the business, and then you're jumping through hoops back and forth just to be able to hire people. Yeah. I, that may fit into place. They may just have a shit ton of regulations to hold people back from doing so.
To leave this envelope on my desk
Exactly.
as you walk out of the room.
Exactly. We have the same thing. We have the same thing. But then the reason why I will not accept corruption as the reason why we are poor is because corruption is a symptom.
It's a consequence of this system.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I am just tired when it comes to Africa, especially that most people are stuck at the symptoms, at the consequences level. We'll never get there otherwise. So we have to, I don't know, I know that it is not sexy to look at laws, to think about laws. For most people, laws are invisible, and it's true. And that's what makes it so complicated. It's an invisible thing, but everything around us, if you think about it, oftentimes is
Held by
ruled
laws.
by regulations and some type of laws. So, so when you talk about corruption, the reason why I hear many people, like those 100 people I told you about being lined up, corruption is going to be probably way up there. And I say, no, corruption is the sign that there are too many laws and also too many senseless laws. Because every time that gentleman gets a chance to interact with me, this person from the state interacts with me, if I did not have to deal with this person like it is in the US, there is no friction. There is no point, there's no place in which this person can exercise the power that the state gave them. When the state said to this person, you get to decide if Constantin and Magatte can work together, right there, you opened everything up for corruption, because this person knows now that my fate depends on his decision or her decision. And so what happens is they're just going to sit there, make things last longer than they should. And eventually that's what also happens. They apply every single piece of the law, hoping that at some point you get tired of it. And eventually it's just faster, easier for you just to pay the bribe and move on with your life. So corruption to me is
CCD, you called it. You called it. Going through the process is too much. They make it too difficult. It's better to just come up with the money so you can pay off the bribe. You called it. You hit the nail right on the head. And that's sad. That's sad. Which means that people who are even taking quote foreign aid, foreign money to be able to help build up their actual businesses within their own country, they're not interested in even seeing their own country become prosperous. I it's crazy. Hey, I'm coming in. I'm a foreigner, or I come in with foreign dollars, and I would really like to help do this. 'Cause I think it will not only build up economy, but you guys have all the resources. I don't have to, do a big shipping labor cost because everything's already here. Or like all these different things, and they're like, you know what you have to do, and it's like, seriously? Don't you even care about the fact that your nation will be way better because of it? God, that's crazy. Oh yeah. I like the guys. They're very smart guys. There's another one that popped up on my feed where there's a debate that he's having with I haven't seen it yet, but apparently he has a debate with some people. I don't know if it's like students or whatever. I can't remember. I can't remember. But I know I should take a look at my feed again. I think it'll be interesting.
is not a good thing, of course, but it's an easy one to fix. Remove the law, remove, the interaction between me and the state official, and you remove that opportunity for corruption and bribe happening.
But the problem is as well with corruption, as someone whose mother comes from one of the most corrupt nations in the world, which is Venezuela, it becomes part of the culture. And that's really dangerous, because I always think corruption is like a cancer. Once it starts to metastasize, you see a country fall apart, which is partly what I've seen.
Yes, yes. And exactly what you're talking about, Francis, is the reason why one of my most radical solutions is basically around this concept of startup cities. I don't know if you guys heard about them. Some people call them
Startup cities.
charter cities, but basically these are next generation special economic zones that have their own law, have their own governance, and also have custom regulatory framework. And so the reason why we suggest, because
Many countries.
right now I'm involved also in policy reforms. So we're talking about piecemeal legislation. As you all know, this takes time, and by the time you manage to get one law taken out or cleaned up over here, 20 million popped up over there, and it's an endless cycle. Meanwhile, I have hundreds of millions of young people who come to an age of working every single year in Africa and have nowhere
And
to
it
turn.
can't work.
This is literally a ticking bomb. A
That's why they're
ticking bomb.
traveling.
Maybe the Europeans see it in the form of all the migrants trying to come to Europe. The Americans, and now we know that some Africans are also using the Central American routes going to Nicaragua and from there passing over to the US. I don't personally
Get
blame
them
those young
rowboats.
people. They have done what humans have done throughout times. In my country right now, what they love is to pound on them, be like, you should have more pride and stay in your own country. No, no, no. The story of humans is if here doesn't work for you, you go over there. All of us are results of just that. And it's the most healthy instinct to have. So I am not mad at it. I am sad. Oftentimes I'm unconsolable. Even today, you get up, you watch, you check the news every single day. There are news of boats, little fishermen's boats, bless you, leaving my country, trying to make it to Europe with tons of young people in them. And I like to say are most entrepreneurial people, because who leaves? This is a
And who's probably
self-chosen
gonna
group,
make it or
right? These
not?
are the ones we need back home. And but right now, for most of them, they're laying at the bottom of the ocean serving as fish food. And I sit there and I ask myself, is this the best way?
That's cold. She's not listen, she's not lying. Some of them are taking rafts and boats. Some of them are, they taking these small boats, maybe like fishing boats, and thinking that they're going to make it across the entire sea to make it to South America, probably in like a small fishing boat or whatever. That's a lot of the seas are like they're not meant for small vessels. The storms alone will do some serious damage. You know, and to think that you're going to be able to make it that far, and we're not talking about like a couple of people. So you must think that that boat must be packed full of people. Damn, that is crazy.
We can do. When they don't die like that, you find them bodies dropping from the plane, because somebody thought it was a good idea to hide in a landing gear, and somewhere above England, here where we are, a body drops. Or you open the cargo section of a plane and you see a frozen body because no one told them that, when it gets up there, things get really cold and they're going to die. And then when they think that air route is too dangerous, sea route is too dangerous, then they're like, we're going to go land route. And land route, so many of them get stuck in Libya. And in Libya right now, when you caught someone like me, they sell you as a slave for between $300 and $500. So the misery, the misery.
I said it.
So for me, it's just
Slave trade.
I I I look at this and I'm thinking to myself, what are we gonna do? What do we do? So, like I said, I've been working on reforms, but that takes too long, and the kids are not waiting. The kids are not waiting. They're like, I've got a life to live. I've got to go now. I've got to try this. Okay. So what's the solution? We have to speed everything up. We have to be radical, and because trying to do things at the national level takes forever, we're like, how about on a smaller piece of land the size of a city? There, we basically change the rules of the game. There,
She's still gonna have to get through a lot of the bureaucracy that already encompass a lot of the world now. Again, what about the whole contested, undisputed land because of um tribes? And still talking about who owns what, whatever. Not to mention, then you have to go through like I guess like zoning laws or whatever, because you're trying to introduce something that other countries have that, quite frankly, you could say that Africa probably is known for. Like, you want to create a super city? Um, yeah, sure, you got Dubai or whatever, but even they answer to someone. So who's going to be the one that takes control of the super cities? You know, you have all the investors that will put money quote into this, but who's the one that's in charge of it?
we bring to the local entrepreneurs the best business environment that there is, a la Singapore or a la Denmark, if not better. And we bring that to people right where they are. And from there, you're almost basically building this area where people get to try before they buy. And for me, this is very much the future. This is very much part of a solution because, like you said, at some point, corruption becomes part of it's in everything, and you try to fight it. You have people fighting you back everywhere. You have all of these entrenched interests fighting from everywhere. You go nowhere. So it is smarter to do it this way. And then when it starts to work here, what we have also found is that actually all these other oligarchs who used to benefit from the system and were very, thriving in this corrupted world, all of a sudden they're finding that
It's an it's an interesting question, and the reason why is like, how impossible is it, right? Apparently, it would be heavily impossible. I mean, think of the land that they're in, right? You you have military, which is not doing anything. When have you ever known, quote, an African military ever being really used, except for quote to take care of rebels? Rebels they keep growing, they keep doing whatever. The military is supposed to be part of the government, and most likely you probably can't even trust them. You know, probably can't trust them to really do anything. They don't have like as far as I can tell you, they don't really have like a special ops team that can go in and try to disrupt and everything else like that. You don't really hear a lot of that. Probably make more trouble than they actually do solutions. Then you have that government issue. You have the politicians, which are pretty much they're pretty much a no go because the people that are running for their political offices are people who are like ex rebel leaders. The people who used to, it's like the what I was talking about in Haiti. They still have those guys who have stupid names. Like, you know, you got a person who's running to be president, and yet his nickname is like the boogeyman. Like, come on now. Like you can't. You're not it. You're not the example. You cannot be that person who comes in. You can't. You're just you're not suitable. Plain and simple. You're not the one. You're not the one we need. And then you have the fact that they're not doing well economically. They're just not. So if people are rushing out because they need to be able to feed their families, they need to be able to take care of a lot of stuff ASAP, they can't afford to really be sitting there wasting time. You don't want to go in the military because if that's going to be your only way to quote um, get out, which is not really getting out because you don't want to throw your life away. Then I'm sitting there thinking like you need education. It's not like you could just go to college in these areas. You're gonna have to get out the country in order to end up going to college. So we can't even say there's educational opportunity for them to be able to do so. And as far as the rebels, I mean, you gotta qualify to be a rebel. And the rebels are still taking kids. So what's the qualification for becoming a rebel? Y- Yeah. The best option is to risk your life to quote have a shot at something better. This is why it drives me nuts when we have people who are born and raised here and they trash the shit out of America. And yet to this day, there are people risking their lives, risking their necks for not just their future, but also the future of their families to this day because the American dream is just being able to have a shot at having a better life for themselves because where they claim that they're currently at, there's no shot. To them, it's just going to be the way there is no shot whatsoever. And that means that if it means that they risk their life to get here, it is worth the small chance, the small shot. Then you have people over here that try to take advantage of them. It's crazy.
oh, wait, first of all, this is extra business for me because now there is activity going on here. And on top of that, now they're starting to convert slowly to the place where you don't have to, you don't need to know anybody in order to thrive. And they're starting to realize, oh, wow, I actually can make
Sweden of
money
all
in a
places.
manner where I don't have to be bonded to anyone. Because a lot of them, they're not living the best lives. You might see them with their fancy homes, fancy cars.
Yo, Edom, I agree. That is a fact. That is 100% irrefutable. Now, a lot of people don't like to treat them that way. A lot of people don't want to admit that, but that is 1000% the truth. Now, I think if we just had more men who were more economically sound, not just the ones who are flashy, to be able to help build in areas, it doesn't even we don't even need to talk about Africa, but just be able to build things up so that people can look at, we can have the examples that we can say are more established. And I mean outside of the fucking music, entertainment, and fashion industry. If we can get other entrepreneurs to really show themselves and become examples, I think it will work out well for a lot of people. But those are the people that get highlighted as the examples. And I would, when I say like there are American men, black men, who will go to Africa to try to build the businesses, and I'm like, these are the people who are trying to start up and trying to get you, trying to get you guys help. And now I hear things like what she's saying, and I'm like, damn, and they had to go through hell and high water just to get those businesses started because it was all about bribery, just to be able to help someone else's country. Yes, they make a profit, in the build up, but that's crazy. That you got to bribe your way into business because, quite frankly, they're just so corrupt.
And fancy everything. But I'm not going to say slaves because, but out of respect for the real slaves, but I see people that are not free at the very minimum. People that owe everything that they have to these governments. There is a government in West Africa, I won't say the name here, where the president is quite known, where you go to the parties. So all of these people who benefit from his largesses, they have these great big businesses, all crony business. You know what he does? He'll invite your wife to go dance with him. You're sitting right there, and he's there touching her, doing all the things he wants to do to her, and there's not one single damn thing you can do about it because you open your mouth or you even flinch your
Ruin you.
eyelashes out of anger, and the next day he'll send you all the people, the auditors that are going to come and tell you how much taxes you actually owe them after all of these years and everything
Damn.
else. Do you really think people like that want to continue like that? So when you create these zones, all of a sudden they start to see, and even them eventually start to convert. So the plan is you do it somewhere where there's actually almost nothing existing. And then from there, you create a new reality. I call these little islands of excellence. And then from there, you watch the island of excellence become an inspiration for other people. And then they try to imitate this, what happened over here. And that's little by little how you get to change everything around you. So that really is the path I've been on, and I've been promoting it for the past year on the continent. At first, it was one country that was very interested, and we had to jump through all the hoops and to interest them.
That probably didn't
And
work
now I'm
out.
happy to say there's 4 nations that we're talking to, and out of
Okay.
those, one I think is ultra promising, and hopefully within the next few months we'll be now able to announce
Don't say
where we're doing
China.
this. So I am so bullish on the continent. It's not even a joke because we know that when you do things like this, it takes within 25 years, we're talking about a generation, you can see the change starting to
Okay,
happen. So
she's
that's
being
why
realistic about that.
my stated goal is by 2.5 billion prosperous Africans by 2050, because that's how many we will be by then. So yeah, that's pretty much what the plan is.
All right. I mean, she's got a goal. She's peeking forward. She says she has, quote, people who are investing. She's very secretive about that because, people are gonna try to stop her if she puts it out otherwise. So I'm not mad at that. Um, I think she has a sound idea. I just don't think it's really going to work given how Africa seems to move, and the way how their politics are moving. I get the question still remains, is Africa poor because of their time of being colonized? It hasn't really been answered. So she has this part here that says colonialism and African
Is it
history.
really true that colonialism, isn't really important in the history of Africa, in the history of where Africa is today?
And I'm always the first one to say, did it have a big role in it? Absolutely, absolutely.
Mm.
But my problem is, if you know, the thing is, I always like to say yes and
Mhm.
right, and not be stuck at we cannot.
You've
What
done
happened?
improv then.
Yeah.
What happened? There's nothing we can do about that.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah.
And denying what
Hmm.
happened also is definitely not where I'm coming from.
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
the first one to say, yes, this stuff happened and it was violent, among probably one of the most violent colonizations that there were, if we have to measure these things. So absolutely, all of that happened. Just like, if you're born to I don't know, drug addicted parents, whatever. Of course, it's going to be part of who you are today. But does that control what you can do later for yourself? No. I had this great friend of mine. He passed away, but he said, no matter what happened to you, you're responsible for what you do for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I really, really, for me, I'm trying to extract our people from that place.
Doesn't that sound awfully familiar? What she's doing over in Britain, she's trying to create a system that will help get her people, quote, out of the mud economically because there's no reason why they should still be sitting behind, especially when the entire world has benefited from a lot of the resources that come from their land. Now, I think it's very interesting what she said because you can kind of relate that to the people that we have here, Americans, who have the same sentiment when it comes to slavery. When I turn around and say, that shit happened, it's over. OVAH, over. Done with. What are you going to do today to help not just help you, but help future generations? Because just looking in the past, you're missing it. You're missing the opportunities here and now. She's got pretty much the same mindset as just going to Africans from quote colonialism. What's different from the way how the Africans are having their complaints about colonialism the same way how we have American blacks here who have their gripes about slavery still to this day. It's the same energy. It's sad. It's the same energy. And now that I'm thinking about it right now, Africans are not doing good because most likely they are still holding on to the past about colonialism. The same way how blacks are not looking that good when it comes to America because they're still holding on to that premise of slavery. I said it a while ago. I can't remember what stream I was on, but in looking through the history, right, and just looking how what the demographics were, what was the percentage of people who were slaves way back when? You only had 5% that were really out there, those who were free, and actually those who were also in the population for who were slave owners. But back in like the 18, I think it was like the 1870s or 1890s. I think it's 1890s, where the population was 13.7%. Now you push yourself forward 193, 94 years to say that we're just still sitting around 14%. You've had an almost 200-year margin, and our numbers practically reflect being the same. We didn't spread out, we didn't develop more. And that was my whole thing about If any of these countries decided to shoot nuclear weapons and they just aimed at all our prominent cities, that is the majority of your black population gone because they up under each other. Think of how much development, how much growth, and not just economics, and not just family and social structure, but also in population we would have had if we just stopped living up under each other. How much opportunity would have been available? Because we talk about black communities, and I'm not just talking about in name, but actual black communities, actual black neighborhoods, if you want to put it out that way, that you could have had, that you still can have. We mention all the time, America's got tons of ghost towns. Pull your resources together, make black communities. Can't say that, especially here in America, that there are not enough blacks who don't understand different parts of business, like shipping, like logistics, like construction, like finance. But instead, we hear the same thing all the time that we're people are championing for other people to give them shit. When you can't, when you can turn around and say, well, there are so many guys, especially because there's so many black men in like blue collar fields. But again, if you have all these black women that are educated, which are just enrolled, mainly enrolled, why not partner together in order to be able to build a better social structure for not just yourself, but also for future blacks, instead of sitting here and begging for the government to do something for you when the government has no obligation to do so? Why not do it? Because the same sentiment that I'm having, what I'm saying to you, is the same sentiment that apparently is happening with this woman. And she's doing it for an entire different nation, an entire different continent. But yet, and still, that same government that we have here has literally put up foreigners in entire fucking towns. There are literally entire towns full of migrants. But for the people that's been here since the inception of this country, since we quote have had our ancestors that have put built this country because of putting all the work on their back. And our numbers are still reflecting roughly the same way it was when they were still in bondage. What does that say about the growth? I find this very astonishing that way across on the other side of the pond, they're still going through the same shit. Now keep in mind, Africa is not nearly as rich as we are, but the mindset seems to still be somewhat the same. I find it very interesting. Uh, okay, well, we can say that about Denzel, but then we can also say the same thing for freaking Oprah's ass. It doesn't necessarily do a lot to help in the long run. Having something in your name doesn't necessarily say that you put a whole lot of work down. And again, I don't really, not not trying to shit on anybody, but I really don't care about the person's name. If you are anonymous, that's fine. I need to see how it's actually benefit. What has happened with these people? How many people have actually turned in? In what way does it reflect? Do they put them in prominent areas? Like, does it work like a scholarship? Like, in order for you to be in this program, you can only get the scholarship if you work in, if you're getting a business in this particular program. Like, you have to do business. Like, you have to do construction. Like, you have to, like, what is it? You have to do solar engineer. Like, what it was exactly going to be? You have to be in that health services. Like, is it specific, or is it just like I'm sending black people to school? They can pick whatever they fuck they want. Because the truth of the matter is that if you give people an opportunity, if you give them the choice, a lot of the times they pick wrong. People do better with the less choice they have. Too many options fucks shit up. This is how we got a whole lot of worthless degrees now, CCD. Too many goddamn options. So if they're allowed to take someone's money to go do what they want to do, they end up just wasting a lot of time. How many of these young girls that went to quote Oprah schools out in Africa do we hear have risen to prominence? You know, that they're reaching back, that they're in government, that anyone? Hey, I'm not even saying that they're not out there, but do we know of any of them? I will even when I go back and I listen to all this, I would even do my due diligence and research because I just don't want to slander that's it, but I just need to know if I can find an example. Because we never hear about these people being highlighted. Because if there was someone who was really out there doing it strong and it was really out there, I'm pretty sure Oprah would have had no problem highlighting this girl. Highlighting this little girl, this little boy, or I guess they will be adults by now, given the generation of when she first started it. She would have no problem highlighting him because why? It would be good. It would be good for her name. But I'm guessing that's a no. That's my guess. I'm open to being wrong, but that's my guess that they just want to be normal people, or the school is as effective as Dr. Umar's. Just saying.
Of commiseration, of this is what happened to us, of this was so wrong. We got to depart from that place. However defining part of our history thought it was. And someone like me, I like to remind our people there were Africans on that great continent before the white man ever set foot on the continent. Who were we? What were we doing? What was our story? And when you look there and you look at the work of people like Professor George Ayite, great new also historians that are coming up, and you see that Africa had some of the richest empires of their times. We don't know this. We don't think about this. In fact, I argue that for most people, Africans and non-Africans, the story of Africa starts with slavery, moves on to colonialism, to present day. So we are robbed from a very important time of our history. And when you look at that time of our history,
Tell me how that sounds any different from what we hear about blacks when it comes to slavery. Slavery, chattel slavery, redlining. We're still slaves today. Tell me how what she just said, because she talked about a whole other continent for a whole other people. Tell me how that sounds that the narrative, the rhetoric, and the way it's formulated, the tonality. Tell me how that sounds any different from the people that we deal with here, who are quote of a higher stature, not caliber, but higher stature because they are in quote the greatest nation on earth. Tell me how they sound, how that narrative that she put out doesn't sound any different. It's it says a lot.
Africans were practicing the free enterprise. We were free marketeers. Trade routes among some of the most vibrant in the world. So that's also part of my birthright. Yeah, have we gotten derailed afterwards? Yes. Yes. Does it play a role in who we are today? Yes. Yes. But is that where the story ends?
I guess some people would like it to be that way. What about the way we have these conversations in the West? Because obviously you're someone who's come from Senegal and you live in the US some of the time. And I imagine because you have a certain skin color, people assume certain things about you and want to sort of bring you into a certain conversation.
Yes.
How do you see the way we talk about these issues in the West?
You know, Constantin, when I came to these
By the
ideas,
way, I love the French pronunciation
yeah.
of my name. It's so good.
What you prefer?
Constantin.
Oh,
Yeah,
you
it's
prefer
so
the
good.
consonant.
It's sexy. I like
What
it.
about me?
What about
Francis.
Yeah, that
Francis.
actually
Yeah,
sounds
not
good.
sexy.
Francis.
Francis? It sounds sexier than Francis.
Yeah. When we were in Austin, that's all anybody said to me, all the Americans, Francis.
I know Americans.
And I keep telling them, you are the one with the weird accent.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
are actually.
Yeah, they are.
They are. It's funny because when I first moved to America, that's when I learned that actually the English that I learned was British, and yes, that's what we learned, and the accent, everything. So since I got to the US,
So you learned correctly.
Yeah.
Yes.
You're welcome.
yes, I agree with you.
That is not a good look, mate.
No.
Just spent half an hour talking about slavery and colonialism.
And then it's like, and then I'm like, thank you.
yeah, thank you.
Well, you know, if I that part of a language, but
But anyway, sorry,
Yeah.
we got
Yeah.
derailed.
No, but you know,
Conversation
when
in
I
the
came
West.
to these, when I came to understand everything that I understand today that I'm sharing with you, I literally lost 90% of my friends. I came from the left. I used to belong to the left. I was borderline commie, if you can believe that.
Really?
Yes,
Why?
yes.
Because that's
Okay.
that was what you were taught, or
Because for the longest, I've always cared about people. I've always cared. I've always cared about people. I've always cared about you know, the I don't know what the right word is, but maybe not the little people, but you know what I mean by that. But I've always cared about those among us who are disadvantaged.
yeah.
You know, and so for the longest time, I really believed what that side was saying, what the socialists were saying. I believe that maybe it was the best chance for you know, disadvantaged people. I believe, and especially, you know, and yes, back then I used to think all the things that I push back on today. I used to think that colonialism is the reason why we were where we were. The fact that our natural
Jeez.
resources are being, you know, literally stolen is why we were where we are. Maybe racism. Maybe, you know, the white people just didn't want us to get somewhere. So I believed I believed all of this for a long time. And
She got indoctrinated
but what I
too.
discovered is once I started running this business of mine, the first time, that's when I started to really, I saw the discrepancy between running a business back home and running a business in the US. And at first I thought to myself, well, of course, we're poor, that's why it's so hard. And conversely, they're rich, that's why it's so easy. Just to come to understand that relationship that I told you about. We're poor because we don't have enough
noticed
money,
that.
at least not
Yeah.
enough money to take care of our basic
really
needs.
good.
Where does money come from for most of us? It's a job, right? And where do
The
jobs
way it
come
should
from?
be done.
The private sector for the most part. And so once you understand that, and then you realize that, and for companies to be, they need a good business environment. And you realize, and here I am seeing that it's so hard for me to do business over here. That's when I was like, wait a second. So the dots started to connect. And I was like, wait a second. And so from that moment on, everything started to collide in my head, because I was like, the people that I have been with this whole time, who were very good at, you know, comforting me in those thoughts of victimhood in a way, they don't like business. They think business is evil.
Yeah.
They
And so-
do.
Yeah.
Does that not is that not the weirdest thing? I find that so strange. And
It's weird that we can run in a society where we'll have people that they will use everything. They'll use everything and then give you every reason is to. And it reminds me a lot of. I don't remember which stream I did, what the name of the stream was, but the idea where you'll have people, black people, because it was a black woman, who's pretty much saying, if you pretty much are working for quote the white man, you know, you're working the white man system, that you're selling out yourself, you're selling out your soul, you're selling out your blackness. There's no sense in even working for the company because the game is rigged. Why even bother? It's not okay to compete. It's like, how could that be the strategy? You'll have people that pretty much will make you think of your life and think that your efforts are worthless. They rather just see, and I'm not gonna just put it on them, but their actions and their words will make it seem like your only option is to be destitute. Why bother striving? Because it's just against you. When we hear the quote, you have to work twice as hard, which is there any different from quote Asians who work twice as hard? Like it's weird to hear people say that it's everything is oppression, everything is struggle, and everything is there's no sense in trying. Why bother trying? That doesn't help anyone in the long run. Never mind yourself. It's not okay to pull everybody else back because you gave up. It's just not cool. And this woman here, who's coming from quote Western world in terms of England and then going over to the States, is hearing all of this ish, and yet it's a different mindset that you have to battle against. It's sad, but it's true. I've heard it for so long. I see it on the internet, and the thing that people are still doing it. This is why I say if we have more of the people who are successful and they're actually cast into the light instead of hiding in the shadows, I think we can do better. I think we can do better in changing a lot of minds, a lot of hearts and minds, and we make these people, our our that's in black people, influencers instead of the scammers, the drug dealers, the dope boys, and fashion people. Because that's not and entertainers and athletes, because that doesn't mean that's not the only pinnacle for success when it comes to black people or for black people. It's too it's too narrow. If we say as black people that you deserve everything the white man has too because you helped build this motherfucker, then why not be represented in all areas of business? Is that weird to say? Is that weird to be? Is that weird that you should be represented everywhere else too? That's just my thought based on what I hear. Those are your words, not mine. Just saying.
There's a lot of it here in England.
Hmm.
There's a lot of it here in England. On TV, people talk constantly about, oh, the 1% this and the 1% that. And I'm going, they pay like a shit ton of tax for all the public services that
That's
we
right.
enjoy.
That's
And
right.
most of them, look, there's crony capitalism, of course there is.
Yeah.
But most of those people got to where they got to by providing a service to other people that those people want to pay for.
Exactly.
And yet these people hate them. I can't get my head around it.
No, and I can't either. But at some point, I came to realize that there's probably nothing to understand. Constantine, when I listen to these people, I saw something. And I saw, because when I started to confront them, why, why, why? Once upon a time, I believed in these ideas and I believed in your good heart. I believe that you too were into it because you believed like me that we was the best chance that the global poor had. The global poor has always been my concern because I come from a continent that's known for that, and that needs to change. So I believed that you guys cared. And now that I'm confronting you, all I hear from you is something rather ugly. Do you know what I hear from them? Envy.
Yes.
Envy. It's disgusting. It's disgusting. It is immoral.
Interesting.
All I could
Interesting
hear,
choice of
all I
words.
could sense was envy. And then I realized, oh, so I was a cover up for you disgusting, most vile sentiment. You were using me and my likes to promote your stupid ideology that in the end just goes to serve your envy. That's when, for me, the left lost their moral high ground. That's it. I was done. And yeah, and I guess they were done with me as well.
This is why I say watch out for activists. Watch out for activists. They will definitely use you and nail you to the wall for their own agenda. Please watch out for activists. Anyone of any form of activism. I don't care if they're trying to represent the rights of cereal boxes. They say cereal box characters, I'm representing them. Be aware. You have been warned.
Magatte, there has been quite a number of criticisms against France and its relationship with the French-speaking African
Oh, I
countries.
don't know if I'm gonna go for
And they
that.
say that there have been a lot of criticisms that France has quite a parasitic relationship to these countries. Do you agree with that? Do you disagree?
I absolutely agree.
All right. So it doesn't seem like they have anything else they're really gonna go into it because the whole French thing's done for a while, and they're not the only people that broke up the country as well. There are multiple countries that came through and broke up Africa, but they're gonna look at France because France's involvement took up the most space when it comes to Africa, and then I just see another sponsorship. Then they have control of currency, and then contradicting beliefs and wrong conversation. You know what? Let's see that one before they top it off.
Is there not a contradiction in what you're saying? Because on the one hand, you say Africa's not poor because of colonialism, but on the other hand, when Francis asks you about French influence,
Yep.
isn't that what people mean by the legacy of colonialism?
I think that's what they mean, but I think they're wrong in that. Because my point is, anytime we could have done this, anytime we could have done this, Constantin, anytime over the past 60 years, we could have, without even touching Orange. Because see, that's the other thing. For me, it's not about you destroy Orange, you kick Total out, you kick all of us Auchan out. That's not, and then business as usual. That's not how we're going to get anywhere. We're actually seeing them doing that. When you look at Burkina Faso, more or less, they have kicked the French out. What do they have to show for themselves right now? The Malians have done more or less the same thing. What do they have to show for themselves? I guarantee you that unless anything changes, 6 years from now, it's going to be the same. But except, like you said, the Russians are the ones coming in right now. So next, what is it going to be? Oh, the Russians are neocolonizing us. So my point is, yes, the French control a lot of the economy, but that's not the reason why we're poor. Remember, again, Constantin, go back with me. You're poor. Poverty is solved by prosperity. Prosperity is built by entrepreneurs. You are not allowing your entrepreneurs to create. When the French show up, what you're doing for them is, here is the red carpet. The nonsense laws that Magatte has to deal with, you don't have to deal with it. The nonsense laws that Magatte has to contend with, or all of these tariffs when she brings up her product, we made a negotiation with you that you're not going to have to put up with that. They give you all types of exoneration, but to me, they don't. And I am the one my country needs. Me and others like me. But we are excluded from the forces that allow us to release our magic of building something out of nothing, which is what I call entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs are those who criticize by creating, and those who create something out of nothing.
They haven't yet. They're trying.
You don't allow me to create. So what's left? And so if I'm not creating, we as a nation stay poor. When a big corporation shows up, which is what Total is, Orange is, all of these companies are, Coca-Cola, whatever, when they show up, you deploy the red carpet for them because like, oh my God, we needed you because we're so poor. We want you to come and create these jobs over here. When you have completely overlooked me over here.
So what you're talking about is essentially people are having the wrong conversation. It's not whether colonialism was good or bad. Of course it was bad.
Yeah.
It's that talking about it is not actually changing anything.
Exactly.
It's making people feel like victims.
Yes.
It's actually making them victims in the future because you're not creating the wealth yourself. And then, as you say, when the big corporations come in, you need their money because you've been brainwashed into being a victim this entire time.
How is that any different from what we deal with over here in these United States? Listen, if you manage to be one of the black folks here, like, how is that any different? That's crazy. That pretty much that summed it up. So what are you gonna do to move something for the future? Because quite frankly, the way how things are set up right now doesn't look like it's really for the best. Just gotta be honest with you. So I do have one more, and that's pretty much people response for her. So I have this young lady over here. She's African herself. She's reacting not only to what is being said by her, but also what other people in their own criticisms who are also African and what they particularly think on this particular thing. Yeah, yeah. It is the circle of life. It's crazy. It's how do we find a way to break that, to break that chain, to break that circle? It's crazy. You know, people, thank you. I thank you for saying that. People should watch this show. But here's the truth of the matter. People people have to be interested in other people. A lot of times we're really focused on our own selves, and keep in mind, it's nothing wrong with being selfish, but we come to a point where we're not really invested in what other people are doing or what's going on in the rest of the world, and that makes us not just ignorant, but it makes us unaware of what are the challenges going to be coming towards us. If we don't take a look at other nations, we want to live vicariously through celebrities and entertainers and such, but we don't want to see the lessons of observation by watching other people intently. That's really what it is. By watching other people and seeing what their shortfalls are. Think about it this way, and I'm gonna say for black folks because this is seemed to be a very black centered thing because it's Africa and everything else like that. If you guys could get out of your own way and stop being so focused on the fact that you think that the white man is standing on your shadow and see that even across the pond, others are also going through this in their own way, using the same words, just twisted around to still talk about, quote, white people in a greater nation that you will say you don't really understand because you didn't go through slavery, but they also went through their own form of slavery because they went through colonization and they also went through apartheid. The same kind of shit that also has taken place here. Now, there was no laws of apartheid, as far as I can tell you, that got put here, but everybody has had their turn to go through something. It's just black people's turn. But every nation of every race has pretty much dealt with some sort of discrimination to a disgusting degree. But even just listening to the words, if you simply change them up, if you simply put the word slavery under Africa and colonization under the US, literally interchange the words, the exact message would be the same. It would be the same. And people could, I'm happy. I'm thrilled that you said that you're really getting something out of the show and you really think it's pretty good. I'm happy about that. I just don't think that people should be invested in learning about what's going on with other people because the way how we have our system set up, we want to live in echo chambers. It's not sexy to learn the truth. The truth is you having the mystique, the magic cast away from you, and realizing that the person that you've been chasing after, the thing that you've been chasing after, the dream you've been chasing after is really ugly. That you think that you're chasing after this castle, this pie in the sky. And when you get to the castle and you've had the spell, you've had that magic dispelled, that you stand around and you realize you're standing in a swamp. You thought you were in a castle. You're chasing after being in the castle. But then when you realize everything at the end, you're really standing in a swamp. Most people don't understand that things they're chasing after is just ruins. They're chasing after the swamp. They're chasing after ideals and they only chase after the good feelings of those ideals. They don't think about the consequences of trying to live up to those ideals. They don't really think about the real expectations to be able to make those things happen. They don't even want to vicariously live through others because part of the ways to vicariously live through others and to learn those examples is imagination. One of the few things that not very many species can do. Human beings, that's a unique gift. It's a unique gift to get to go as far as we do when it comes to imagination, and people willfully choose not to exercise it. But let's see how these people are going to respond to this woman and her
Hey you
criticisms.
guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is LaLa. Thank you everyone for
Shout out to you, LaLa.
subscribing recently, for tuning in, liking, commenting. All of you guys, thank you so much because my page has been growing so fast. But today I'm going to be doing something a little
And good
different.
on her.
I'm going to be reacting to TikToks and the stitches.
Today, Singapore is richer than its ex-colonizer, Great Britain. So when I hear people telling me today, oh, Africa is poor because of colonization, I'm like, please, let's move on from that. Does it have maybe a tiny percentage in where we are today? Maybe, and I don't know. But I know it's not the cause. Because if it were many
She had a pause on that one
countries
already.
have been colonized before, and by the way, colonizing one another is humanity's history. It just happened that maybe Africa has been one of the last, colonized region in the world. So in our psyche, it is there, and it acts like nothing happened before to others. But flash news.
I'd have to think about it. Chat. I have to think about it. Because quote palefoots as Native Americans, but if palefoots were already landed in Africa prior to the colonization that took place in the US, could we say that the last place being colonized was Africa? I thought the whole manifest destiny thing would have been, quite frankly, one of the last places to be quote colonized. Maybe the U.S. got sorted out before Africa did. Does anyone know that for sure? I never thought about it. I never thought about that. Does anyone happen to know ahead of time? Maybe someone already knows about that. Yeah, yeah.
News, it's the history of the world. We've been capturing each other back and forth, all of that. So anyway, but the truth is, Singapore, richer than Great Britain today. And then Hong Kong happened. And then because Hong Kong happened, China even today happened. Because China's like, wait a minute, what went on over there? And then China went on to do the exact same thing with its SEZs, the special economic zones, some of the most free market zones in the world. And then look at it happen in communist China, who, when it comes to economics, decided that we're going to do the
You said Africa was thriving in Bible times. When you say Africa, do you mean like Egypt? Is that what you mean by Africa? Like is that what you're referring to, the desert, N- northern Sahara? I just want to be a little clear about that. They did. They absolutely did. Well, and, and keep in mind, multiple tribes did that. Multiple tribes who were infighting with each other. The victors, or rather losers who became slaves, were sold off to whites. Because the funny part about it is that here's the truth of the matter: together in tribes, when they were all being good with each other, white people didn't have the manpower to take slaves. They didn't. It's only when all the infightings happened and the tribes became separate and they were battling each other that they were able to sell off people as resources. Together, when they were all together, white people just could not, they couldn't take them down. They didn't have the numbers, they didn't have the strength, they didn't know the terrain is good. Once, and I don't know, some people even say that it's the white people that started the infighting because the white people chose sides, or they provided weapons in order to help the people fight, whatever. All that has been mixed up in different sides or whatever throughout history. but the process of taking the resources, rather not even taking, being granted the resources from the victors, which was in capital of people. That's the doing also of quote Africans. Those, yeah. So yes, they have quote been thriving. Um, they might have, yeah, they're thriving in Bible times, but the Africa then is also not the Africa that we see today. Like I don't think we can look at them and say that they are true descendants of those people, because like the top of Africa now doesn't belong to blacks. It's completely an Arab nation now. Um, and also, Romans came in and did some damage to Egypt as well. You know, I think of Marcus Aurelius. Yeah, I think of Marcus Aurelius. Rome came down and they were doing their thing too. You know, had a whole lot of influence over there. Yeah, absolutely. Circle of life. Absolutely. Yeah. This is just literally literally throughout time, despite development, the Matrix is taking place. Just reboot that shit. Game over. Reboot.
Free market, we're going to be capitalists because that's the only way. We tried everything else. We killed hundreds of millions of people, and we have
Responses, and let's see what people have to say.
Africa is poor because of colonization. I'm like, please,
Doing it
let's
again?
move on from that.
So the level of ignorance this lady displayed in this particular video is too much. And I'm happy that most people told her that she's ignorant. In fact, this lady's ignorant. She doesn't understand how the world works. She's basically ignorant. His, basis for his argument is weak. She's trying to compare an entire continent to one country, China, and Singapore. You are trying to, your comparison doesn't even make sense. Now you are saying that Great Britain colonized Singapore, and today Singapore is rich. The British, they left Singapore, or neo-colonial project is not alive in Singapore today because Singapore have no better resource, right? And the Western America didn't build their economies at the expense of Singapore's economy. The Western America target Africa. They build their economies at the expense of we Africans' economies. So neo-colonial project is still alive in Africa. When we talk about colonization, some people, they think colonization has ended. No, slavery has ended, but neo-colonial project is alive. So it's not a thing of the past. It's still happening. You see, you're trying to compare us to China. What is the population of China? Almost 1.5 billion people, right? And China is one country. Africa is still fighting to even unite. And the West keep on killing our leaders. All the leaders who try to unite.
He got a point. He got a point. There were definitely some people who, when they tried to get to the top, they were taken out. They were taken out. In Africa, they were taken out in multiple areas. They were taken out in Africa, northern, southern. People who were rising up in villages. There's been the speculation of people who may have been taken in the middle of the night. Maybe the family got a random ticket to somewhere more prosperous. It's there's been things like that has taken place. Uh, pretty sure they were sold to, yeah, Chinese workers were sold. They were sold. They were sold. China definitely sold slaves. Absolutely. We do. We do. I can't take that away. We absolutely do.
Unite Africa. They kill us. Africa is divided. We call it divide and conquer. So they deliberately divided Africa into pieces in order to exploit Africa. Some African countries are not even allowed to even spend their own currency. They have to still spend the colonial master currency. And some have tried their possible best to get out of this situation, but the Western America still, they kill their leaders, right? You cannot blame everything entirely on us. We are also trying our best on the continent. Looking at this lady, I can see that she grew up in the West and basically, she's saying what she has been told to say because she have no idea what is actually happening on the continent. She's ignorant. She doesn't know anything about African politics, history. He got it wrong. Everything, this woman got it wrong. She have no idea what is happening on the continent. Now, both China and Singapore, they are all in Asia. Are you trying to tell me that all Asian countries are wealthy? Are you trying to tell me that all the countries in Asia are rich? There are some countries in Asia who are extremely poor, poor even more than Africa, right? So you don't compare
He's not
a
wrong.
single country
He's not lying about
to an
that.
entire continent.
Still to this day,
Then you blame us.
he's not wrong at all. There are definitely lots of areas in Asia that is still poor. Lots of time, lots of little lots of villages that are still sitting around in China and Thailand. Yeah, there's a lot. Uh, Not everybody sitting around and thinking, "Oh my gosh, I can't wait to go back to Vietnam." There's very small places that you really want to be at Vietnam. Um, yeah, so he's not wrong about that.
He was spot on with his. I'm
I
gonna have
got
to
the
respond
fool.
to that one. Like, he's telling the truth. Like every African president that I've known that spoke up to the truth, like, or tried to speak up or stand up against corruption, they've been, murdered, assassinated. Look at the president of Haiti, the president in Tanzania.
No chase,
When all
no
this
chaser was good. Oh shit!
pandemic.
I didn't even think about that. Haiti, yeah, that president was absolutely assassinated. I'm still trying to figure out how the fuck and his whole Secret Service detail. Wow, that was a big clusterfuck. But yeah, absolutely. I forgot about that one.
Was going on. Like, what happened to them when they stood up to what's right? Like it's still going on now. So for you to compare these other countries that are not even close to a comparison is just ridiculous. And I knew she was ignorant when she kept saying maybe, 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 maybe what? You can't make such a strong statement and use the words maybe more than once in your statement or even at all.
She absolutely can, especially if she doesn't want that to be quote the center point for people complaints. Because what she said was maybe, 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 but quite frankly, she doesn't want us to talk about that. We want to talk about how we can do things to push things forward. That's pretty much me paraphrasing her. Because quite frankly, when we start talking about the development of people, right? If the first thing people do is to bring up all the negative, if the first thing if you're coming into a position and you want people to get pumped about doing things and about all the change that you can have, and you come with the energy of Tigger, the first person we do not want to hear his mouth going off is Eeyore. We don't want it. We don't want Eeyore to speak. We don't want Rabbit to speak. Those two motherfuckers, you sit to the back. I will hear Piglet over fucking you guys. No Eeyore. No Rabbit. That's it. We need Tigger. We need Piglet. And we need Pooh. Those are the only people that need to speak. And too many people come in with the thought process of Eeyore and Rabbit. It's just too much. It's too much. So to get that out the way, maybe that was the case. Maybe yeah, sure. Just that's not what the fuck we're talking about. I don't think that's a bad thing. I personally, it's okay to dismiss that if that's going to be the first thing always brought up. That's just my speaking though. That's just my speaking.
You gotta be completely sure what you're talking about before you make such a strong statement, because these things are still in place to hold the continent down to this day. You know, there's still neocolonization going on in Africa right
Hey, now we got neo colonization. What does that mean, folks? That means they're still colonized today. They're still, you know what neo colonization is, folks? Systematic oppression, systematic racism. Am I wrong? Am I wrong? I'm just saying. Is the word any different? Yes, the words are completely different. Is the tone in which she says the word sound any different? The answer is no. No, it's not. The woman was dismissing it as quickly as possible because the first thing that they go to is victimhood. So all the reasons why we can't first.
now. So let's get into the other replies.
Africa is poor because of colonization. I'm like, please, let's move on from that.
Any infrastructure Europeans built in Africa was to transport goods, resources from the interior of Africa to the coast to be taken to Europe. Any roads, railway, anything at all, if it didn't serve Europeans to extract Africa's wealth, Africa's resources to the coast, to Europe, it was not built, not one. So yeah, we are going to talk about colonization when we look at the current state of Africa. As for Ethiopia,
Hey yo, so there's not a lot of people. There's not a lot of people watching, right? Which means I need more from you guys. So that means if there's like 4 people up in here just watching, I need like $20 a piece from you guys. I need you to, I need you to send that. I need you to send that to either my Cash App. You can send it to my Cash App. Like it's in the description box, all that stuff. Like if you want the open panel, I need like $20 a head. We need to get like $100 in here. All right. And then I opened up the panel. Oh man. Guys, if you did not see Will's show today, he was absolutely cooking. He was absolutely doing this thing. It was entertaining. There's a lot that I learned about what's still happening in spaces. It was a big conversation, yo. Yo, definitely, yo. Shout out to the Cellulite podcast, yo. That shit was great today. It was great. I love watching what's going on there. That shit was funny.
because I know what you're gonna say. Think of coffee, where coffee comes from and how much money Ethiopia makes. Close to nothing. And how much money the people you think are so prosperous because they're so smart make off of it.
What is with her eyebrows?
I also like to talk about information. This is a good place to talk about information and how much information is repressed when it comes to African history. For example, myself, who's been reading history since I was a kid, I learned about Stalin's gulags and Hitler's concentration camps, including those
Yes,
in
sir.
North
Into the weed
Africa,
fund. Absolutely.
before I learned about internment camps, detention camps, work camps, where people were tortured, died in sub-Saharan Africa.
I can't. It's hard for me to take her seriously because her eyes is bulging out of her goddamn sockets. Her eyebrows look like they got fucking mopped on her fucking face, and she got this weird orange snuggie on, yellow snuggie, canary yellow snuggie on. It is hard to focus looking at her. It is crazy what's going on here. What is happening?
For example, the Congo River Railway, the one from Brazzaville to Pointe Noire, which I think they also connected to bring manganese from Gabon, Mbinda to Congo to Pointe Noire. Anyways, when building that railway from Brazzaville to Pointe Noire, in 10 years or a little over 10 years, more people died than building the pyramids of Giza in 80 years. And the shit that those workers went through building that shit, I mean, part of it was, Mayombe, like the forest was just, to build anything at all was close to impossible, and they made the Africans do it. The volunteers that they recruited, they forced them. And they lived in those work camps in horrible conditions. Or the detention camps during the Mau Mau rising in Kenya between.
Does not sound like everywhere else when it comes to the plantations. Hmm? How many slaves done lost their lives working in the fields, tilling the freaking fields, getting their back cracked with a freaking whip? How many of them done lost their lives because they done fled? They was running, being a swamp nigga. Doesn't that sound awfully like that? So many died, and then of course they went to the war and they died there too. Doesn't that sound awfully familiar? Just kind of change the words up a little bit, but just hear the tone. Does it sound that different? I feel like I'm hearing the same thing. Things that she probably never experienced in her own life, her own lifetime. Almost willing to bet that. Because I'm pretty sure, even to this day, her ancestors weren't the one that made that snuggie for her.
1952, 1960, 1959, where people were tortured in those camps.
I hear people telling me today, oh, Africa is poor because of colonization. I'm like, please, let's move on from that.
So this is a very interesting and popular argument, so let's talk about it for a little bit. What I would like to do right now, as opposed to advocating for one side or the other, is provide both sides of this argument. Because this topic is fairly nuanced and fairly complicated, both sides usually misrepresent each other fairly often. So what I would like to do is talk about some of the literature and the theories behind this argument. A perfect representation of what this argument really is can be found in the title of two books. This one, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa by Walter Rodney, and this one, How Africa Underdevelops Africa by Stan.
Okay, I hope you. Okay, so, young man, you have started this out by sounding as if you were going to be very rational. So I will give you that. You said that we need to observe this and we need to, go through the points between both sides because there's an argument to be made. So, to best come to the most rational understanding and the most rational conclusion, we need to be able to examine both sides. Correct? Cool. And then you offer two books with the same title, pretty much sounding as if they're only on one side. Are you about to provide any information on the other side? Because you've already just brought up two pieces of material with the same damn name about how they ruined Africa. What you brought is not evidence, it's a presupposition. The title alone, I haven't read the book, but the title alone is a presupposition. And you can say it's not a presupposing because we already know that Europe ruined Africa. When the entire title that we're going through for this stream is Africa poor because of colonization? Because evidently, from all the stuff that we were just already looking through, there are lots of things that Africa did that helped put it in its position. Is it really the Europeans' fault, or did Africa also play a major role in this? It's the same thing I said when I covered the Haiti crisis. You can look at the French, but wasn't it the Haitians that signed themselves into debt to have themselves free after already kicking the motherfuckers out? Where was the self accountability for that? Hey, 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 hey. Maybe he's gonna provide more info. Shout out to the Hanley gang. Yeah, shout out to the Hanley gang.
Stanley Igwe. The names of these two books obviously gives a pretty solid overview of what this argument really is. In How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, Walter Rodney unapologetically argues that as Africa was developing Europe, Europe was systematically underdeveloping the continent. Europe deliberately and drastically exploited Africa, and the effects of this exploitation can still be seen politically and economically on the continent today. The idea here was that any idea that capitalism brought by Europeans somehow helped Africa financially is a myth, it's a mirage. In reality, Africans need to understand what capitalism is and the damage and destruction, the carnage it's brought on our continent. This is Rodney's argument. Igwe, on the other hand, admittedly claims that his book is not necessarily meant to replace Walter Rodney's, mostly because that would be pretty difficult to do. Rodney's is a classic. And Igwe acknowledges that Rodney's book still has a place in the discourse here. However, he feels like a part of the argument that's important as well is the roles that African leaders played in the underdevelopment of our countries. Igwe argues that the origin of poverty and underdevelopment in Africa can be traced to Marxism and what could be called the blame colonialism game. Igwe articulates an argument somewhat similar to another passionate voice in this debate, the Ghanaian economist George Ayete. Ayete argues in several books that African problems require African solutions. And he claims that a lot of African leaders are always running to the West, either for ideas or for handouts. And their constant desire to play the victim card while berating the West, while at the same time constantly asking the West for money, is what's leading to Africa's economic collapse.
I heard
In
no
this
lies so
particular book,
far.
Africa Betrayed, Ayete basically goes off on a lot of African leaders and points out all of their shortcomings and all of the ways that they have destroyed the continent. But on the other side of this argument, we have to consider the concept of neocolonialism, according to Kwame Nkrumah, the first president of Ghana.
Okay.
And we will continue with neocolonialism in part 2.
I'm like,
well, yes, it is. Because
Okay.
different regions of the
It's a
British
post
Empire
conversation, but okay.
got different functionalities for this empire. For example, some regions are designed for them to migrate to, like Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. These regions will form into a market that majority of its societies are white people, and so they can do business, and also they can migrate to. And some regions like Hong Kong and Singapore, their functionality is to be a port for them, so they can transfer their goods, and also these cities can sooner form into a business market for them as well, and these cities can be rich. And some places they have much resource, and those places are for the British Empire to exploit. For example, Africa and India. That's why these countries are poor, because the British Empire don't have the desire or any will to build these countries, to develop these countries, because they don't care. They just want to exploit these countries. And that's why these countries still can't recover from the exploitations until today, because their functionalities are not
Until
for
today?
developing a good market for British Empire. They're just simply a exploitation farm for the British Empire. And people always use Singapore and Hong Kong compare with these regions that got exploited. And
Now, I have also used Hong Kong, Singapore, and even India in comparisons, but I also stated differences. For instance, I'll reiterate myself, Hong Kong under British rule, India under British rule, same thing for Singapore under British rule. But I've also indicated the fact that Hong Kong was totally different. And China, once Hong Kong was free, benefited immensely from Hong Kong. India, when set free, benefited immensely after British rule. And Singapore also boosted up so much after British rule. And the comparisons was also the fact that Africa, being a large continent on its own, should have had double if not triple the resources that all three of these other land masses had. And we're not talking about what back in the day when whites rolled in. We're talking about in the 21st century, right? To say that you still don't have much of a development when a lot of these nations came up between the 19th and 21st century, these nations have pretty much been Africa, Singapore, Hong Kong, and India pretty much were freed at the same time. But yet, things pretty much didn't go the same way. And it's weird how they went the same way for technically three of the four. But the largest continent of all of them didn't grow. I'm I'm a little lost. You said did he blame it on colonization and the white countries need to develop their own? Yeah, that's pretty much what he said. And yeah, that's that's exactly what he said. That's exactly what he said. And I agree, they're still developing, but they were developing even under British rule. They were. Now, keep in mind, they're still developing because, quite frankly, it's a pun intended. It's a shitty place, but there are plenty of areas that do very well, and hopefully, they can clean a lot of that up. I think they'll do very well. I think they will do very well once they're able to do a catch up. Now, what would that look like in the future? Not sure, because they are behind a bit on the technical game. There are some things that they are doing very well in terms of some ways for businesses and technologies, but the innovation and development that needs to find it needs to find a way to do the catch up. Because I'll be honest with you, Mama. I know Indian people, cool with Indian people, but if my phone rings and I pick it up and there's an Indian voice that I do not recognize, I'm immediately thinking scammer. You won't get me. Just that sounds wrong. I said what I said. I said what I said. It could be someone who's trying to hand me an inheritance, and it just so happened the motherfucker's a lawyer for fucking cop cars. That guy could be handing me an inheritance from a long lost person, who by some kind of divine right pass it on to me. Joshua, what's going on? But if that motherfucker if that motherfucker calls me, and especially if he calls me and last name is Patel or sing or some bitch named Priya, I'm hanging up the phone. I'm hanging up the phone quick, fast, and in a hurry. Just letting you know. That's just that's just how I feel.
Saying that colonization is not bad, and I will say they don't know a bit about history at all.
Okay, y'all. So my opinion on this, like, she's just completely ignorant. Clearly, she doesn't know history. I could tell she was ignorant, and her stance was ignorant from the moment she said the first maybe, because you're grasping at straws trying to make such a strong statement and sound smart, and you're really just ignorant as hell. And the fact that that Africa is still neo-colonized, like, to this moment, and
So I do have a question, um, LaLa. I got a question for you. By any chance, did you look at any of her other work, so that she gives her broader definition as to why it is, or is this simply a response based on this clip on its own? Because even the clip doesn't do a fair justice because we're talking about an entire interview that was done with Jordan Peterson. And the thing I like to say to everybody is that if you're going to make judgments based on clips, I'll tell you, like I would say to myself, that doesn't make you wise, it makes you the fool. So I would hear the clip, give my thoughts, and not even give my thoughts. If I was really intrigued, I would hear the clip, and if I thought it was interesting, I would go for the full context. And then after getting the full context, then I would make the video. That's just me though. I'm very anal like that. That's just me. Um, but if you're saying you only looked at the clip and then you looked at other people's responses to a clip and you don't really know much about the woman herself, then yeah, I can definitely understand why you may have the particular views that you do. Um, hopefully, you went to go see there was more down the line of what she was looking for, and what was her quote solutions for being able to make those things better, and why she's pushed herself in a position to become rather dismissive. Because quite frankly, the idea of the woe is me and to still hold on to that doesn't help your nation in the future. It doesn't even help your nation in the present. Just being honest with you. Just being honest with you. That's just my personal thoughts, my opinions. Just like you have yours, you're entitled to have them. But we can't make up our own facts, especially the people who are trying to make solutions. We we have to give the quote innovators a chance to make things better. This is the reason why people let Elon Musk throw fucking rockets in space. Because why? He's an innovator. He's a revolutionary. And I think too many times because we were in a victim mentality, we don't want to be revolutionaries because we're too busy unwrapping ourselves in the blanket of victim. So be careful if the things that you are expounding to and the things that you're hearing about and the things that you're believing now, even yourself, are due to indoctrination. Because yet there's people out here who hear these things and they've chosen personally not to be indoctrinated, to fight against it because they believe in a better future. Is it really wrong if she turns around and makes your nation better by saying we need to dismiss the past? If it brings you a brighter future, isn't it worth it? Isn't it worth dispelling the the mysticism, the magic of victimhood? Isn't it worth it? If it means that your country will do better, and not just for your children, but your children's children, your children's children's children, isn't it worth it? Just saying.
and you're not aware of this, it just shows me like you have a complete disconnect and you're completely ignorant. But let's move on to the next video. So in the next video, I haven't completely watched it yet, but it's basically Africans having a discussion with African Americans. So let's start it.
Even though I want to disagree with you.
Okay. So you guys may have seen this. The clip that she's looking at is a Jubilee video. It's a middle ground. It's Africans versus African Americans. And there was definitely the talk about colonization versus their experience of colonization versus the experience of slavery. In my opinion, it didn't really go anywhere. But I'll give it I'll give it a shot so you guys can get your own context of it. Again, it's a clip. There's a little bit more into that. So
I get where you're coming from. When I see black people talking about racism, all that stuff, I'm like, what is wrong with these people? You guys have food, you have EBT, all these things, and you're here shouting about somebody is racist too. Just leave that person and move on. I feel that way. Like, why are they always like complaining? But when Black Lives Matters started happening, like, I sat down, I said, I need to actually know why these people are pained. And if we look at the history, what they've done to them, like if you actually sit down, watch some documentaries, how they were maltreated, I don't think if I'm actually born, I will forgive those people. I don't care. It's easier for us Africans that were raised in Africa to feel like they're complaining because we were raised through struggle. Like I barely even have water, and you have water, you're complaining. But then it's not about the basic.
That's a good question. I'm not sure. Honestly, here's the truth of the matter. Any African I've spoken to doesn't have a high opinion of him. They don't have necessarily a negative. Well, I have spoken to two who didn't like Elon Musk. I don't know if it's because he's South African and they're Northern African, I should say. I don't know if there's a beef or something going on there, like East Coast, West Coast, East Coast, West Coast, Philly, Japan. Like I don't get it. So I don't know if that's a thing. I just know that most Africans who I have spoken to, and Elon Musk might have come up, very rare, but might have come up. They didn't necessarily have much care for him, so I can't say whether they claim him as their own. I never asked. I never asked. I don't think it's yeah. That's also true. Also true. Listen, he can donate to politicians and everything, but he don't even have to vote. It's not his battle. Just saying. Uh, well, technically, he's not American. Technically speaking, he's a South African. He is African. Can't even call him African American until he decides to put up a lot of time and have a dual citizenship and decides to actually own residence here. He's not even that. Unless he gets married to an actual American. You say he has U.S. citizenship? Oh, because according to this man, he doesn't own a house or anything. He doesn't own it. He doesn't own property. He doesn't. Does, does he have U.S. I didn't know if he had. I didn't know he had U.S. citizenship. I'm not really invested in Elon like that. I like his ideals or the ways of how he goes about things, but I don't really look into his life. I don't care about where he lays his dick down. Like that stuff doesn't. It does not intrigue me. Hmm. So I don't know. I guess technically it does make him um yeah, I guess technically then it does make him African American, which I find humorous. I do. Uh damn. 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 Cause you know what's so crazy about this one, Joshua? If he is African American, I can't even get mad at him for acting white. That's totally on his side. He's African American, and we can't say nothing wrong about him for acting white. Can't say shit. Damn, he got the win. He got the win. That's a mama. That's a W. He's got a W on the entire black race. Damn. Damn, Joshua. Damn, I didn't even think about that one.
Basic necessity or about how we are raised. We are raised like, I don't want to say way better. We might not have resources, but there's some way, like our own people will not look down on us or put us behind. So it's in their nurture that way. Like they just can't overlook it. And if you sit down and watch everything that the forefathers have been through for you, I changed my mind. No, they need to be angry. However, they should still move forward.
But even she said it herself. Yeah, okay, cool, whatever. They should be angry. Can we dial it back? Can we dial it back just a little bit? Just a little bit. You can be upset. You can even say it's a bit distasteful. Angry? I think the people who actually suffered during those times have the right to be angry. I think you have the right to be upset. I don't think you really have the right to be quote, angry. Is it fucked up? Yeah, it is. Things like slavery, things like redlining, yeah, absolutely. It's very disheartening. It is. But I'm not gonna burn down bridges, churches, and riots and shit like that. I'm not gonna go to the nearest liquor store and trash the shit up. I'm not gonna go out of my way and harm other people, you know, punching other people so that they can also get a hate crime bill. Like I'm not gonna do it. I'm not gonna do it. It it serves no purpose. It serves no good purpose. And what the young woman said at the end of that is also very important because I think it's the most important part. You have to move forward. And a lot of people they talk, but they do little. They don't move forward. Just saying. She's right in that part. But that part can easily be ignored.
Let's look at the responses before I even say anything.
No, let's just get to your response.
Let's look at the responses before.
Coming from when I see black people talking.
On top of that, I appreciate you too
Please don't mention racism.
for
Please don't
looking
mention
into our
racism.
history and everything.
Please
But
don't
did
mention
you
racism.
even? I could get a little deep, but I ain't got that much time. We need to do the same thing about y'all history, but since we're not over there, so we're not gonna do.
Hey, whoa, whoa. He rather light skinned. He's saying we're not over that. Who is we? I'm American, not French. Who's we?
Too much studying about y'all history, just to be honest, because we're not over it. But as soon as y'all get over here, y'all start seeing the things and that's going over in America, and you can see why we complain. I mean, you don't understand why we complain so much. But
Who is we? You can say you. You can speak for you. You can even say some. Don't say the majority. Don't do that. Don't do that.
just we've been over here for 400 years, and
There's no way you've lived that long. Black Americans have been here, well, not even 400 years because there was a time span where it wasn't America. It was not founded yet. But you say you know the history. If we're going to be correct, just saying, just saying.
Africans can come over here day one and have an advantage over us. Day one, 24 hours. You could get grants. You don't have to pay taxes for, what, I think 5 years? Just like any other ethnicity. We've been here for 400 years. We can't get, we can't even, we can't get the grants.
Ooh, where's the drop? A bullshit. A bullshit. Most people don't. Most people, even hard running too, don't even pay attention to see what grants are available. It's the big ass fucking book, big fucking book for grants, and you don't look. There are definitely grants. There are grants for it's so many. It's ridiculous how many fucking grants are out there. You don't look. Your idea of learning, your idea of knowing what grants are available is by word of mouth. You don't go and pick up the fucking books yourself. You don't go take a look yourself. These people, they're passing the information to each other. They pass the book down to each other. Oh, I forgot. Reading is racist. Excuse me.
That we're denied on a wide scale of business loans.
Sorry, I went to Jigaboo school.
Any kind of loans. Us Americans that we built this country off our ancestors. We can't get loans like anybody else. You
can. Huh, we gonna do it like Obama. Oh, yes, you can. Yes, we can. You absolutely can. Who is we? See, you don't prove to yourself and to the people who have to watch you that you're very cognizant of the things in your own country. You're not aware of the very opportunities in your own country. I can't help you. Can I help you? Not with a 9-volt battery couldn't help you. Could put the battery right in your fucking back and you still wouldn't go out of your way to get the information.
can get loans, grants, and everything as soon as y'all get here. It's a fact.
They know where to look because they open up their mouth. They speak to the immigration person. When they mention they want to go to school, they speak to the registered office. You fill out a fucking FAFSA. Do you know that you have to look for your own scholarship? Do you think that the person, the recruiter, is going to give you all of the scholarship in the fucking land that you can get? You look up your own. You see what you qualify for based on the actual fucking degree in the field that you're trying to get into. See if you fucking qualify. Qualify early. Do it early. If you know you plan on going to school, why aren't you looking ahead of time? Why aren't you applying for as many grants as possible? In fact, you should be writing essays for when you're getting ready to go get your fucking grant. Just go fucking send it ahead of time. They can say they got your fucking paperwork to get see you got your fucking essay to say, I really need this fucking grant because I wish to make something for myself. But most people don't like to put a lot of effort into anything, not even in freaking interviews. What am I saying? What am I saying? Because these probably one of the same people that come to me with a fucking resume that's been folded up in their pocket. Because that's how much time, attention, and effort that's put into research. Because the idea of research comes from word of mouth. It has to come from another soul. And let me guess, that other soul must have been a black person, right? Because God forbid if a white person told you that there were black grants for you. That, other people are taking advantage of. And they're actually getting multiple grants. One, for being an immigrant. Two, for being black.
We was forbidden to read and learn up to 150 years ago. Yeah, we hung from trees because we try to educate ourselves. Yeah. They ate us. Yeah. Them colored people, they ate us. Consumed. Picnic. When we did thrive, Tulsa, Oklahoma, you doing your research, they bought.
I can't do it. I can't do it. In my spirit, I can't do it. Goodbye. 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 We're going forward. We're going forward. Forward, right? Forward. I can't with you. We're going forward. I can't with your ass. Can't with your oppressive ass. I can't. You sitting there laying back on your luxury fucking sheets and pillows and shit like that, but you sitting there talking about what we did. Negro, you didn't do any of that. You did not. Your ancestors, your forebearers, your predecessors went through that. You didn't experience that. You know what your predecessors didn't experience? Your cotton picking. They didn't have AC. You were sitting there all comfortable. You know what they didn't have? What you have? The frames in your fucking face. What is this we shit? The French weren't here. What are we doing? No. And I'm gonna put this up again. Several publishers. People don't That's why I just had it sitting up there. Most people don't bother looking. You know what they say? Oh, I didn't even know that exists. Say you give it to them, right? You know what it becomes? A coffee table book. Becomes a coffee table book. Give it to someone who's a foreigner. You know what it becomes? Reading material. Nighttime reading material. The issue with the foreigners that you say come in and right off the bat they get stuff is that they come here with something called the American dream. And for some reason, you have been told for so long that you have been awake that when you go to sleep, you can't dream. They go to sleep and they can actually dream. And because they can dream, they wake up and they feel inspired to do something about it. You have been told that you have no dreams. Even if you try to have a dream, it ain't worth anything. Why try? Why bother? Why? Because your ancestors. You remind me, you know what? Hold up. This is what it reminds me of. Hold on. Hold on. This is what it is. Oh no, I need a proper one. Hold on.
I have two younger brothers.
This is what I basically hear and see when I deal with some of y'all. I really have to play this because this is the way how I see it sometimes when it comes to you guys.
My brother Darrell and my other brother Darrell. But Mister always seemed to single me out the way. I would get
And the last one is most important. Let me just hear this.
Mister, I want to be a doctor when I grow up.
Nigga, did I just catch you wanting to be shit?
That's pretty much what your whole hopes and dreams were. Gone. Did I just catch you trying to be shit? So you can't dream. You absolutely 1000% can't dream because you're afraid of trying to be shit. They can still dream. Ain't no one slapped them in the. Did I catch you trying to be shit? You so dashed and defeated, you can't dream. Sleeping on your nice mattress, the nice fitted sheets. But you can't do it. It's too hard. Why bother? It's against you. You're using the words we. Cause we was there. We was hanging from trees. He remembers the feel. He remembers the rope. He remembers the rope around his neck. He said we. Like, sometimes we have really good conversations at the end of our streams. Joshua, you were around for this. What was part of the thing that I said that was so good about the human condition when it comes to memories? There's a reason why we're not supposed to remember shit. Could you imagine if we remembered, or if we could remember what our ancestors went through, if that was somehow passed into DNA? Do you think that we would have a civilization? We would just have a whole bunch of jokers. We would just have people trying to burn down the world. Because if you could remember all your feelings of all your experiences, you're going to want to burn the world down because you will understand that you go through more losses than wins in your life. You go through more hurt and heartache and pain than anything else in your life. The wins you want are minuscule compared to the effort and sacrifice that you make for something. And yet you turn around and you say to other people, because you're the one with the defeatist mindset, you're the one. And then to other people who show up, even the people who are foreign, say, I'm happy that you came through and you turned around and you wanted to educate yourself on us. You wanted to educate yourself on us to understand the oppression we still going through. Like he takes off his shirt and he still got the lashes that came from his ancestors on his back. Ask him what's he doing today. He's probably not going to have a good answer for you because all he can do, he'll probably be able to look back and just see all the missed opportunities. Because why? He bought into a narrative that pretty much did this.
I was going to be. Mister, I want to be a doctor when I grow up.
Nigga, did I just catch you wanting to be shit?
And that's the damn sad truth. That's the sad truth. And I had to skip him because I refuse to have those narratives keep being poisonous and being put into my head, and I'm not gonna do that to y'all. I'm not going. First of all, for the people who ain't black, and I said the word ain't. I don't need y'all being indoctrinated with the idea of thinking that this is what black people do. And I refuse to hear it because I don't want that trope being in my head to thinking that that's something we should accept.
When I see black people talking about racism, all that stuff,
What's good,
This is a really
Conjari?
good
What's good,
conversation.
Zoomer?
And I think what she's saying really is a product of media and marketing. And what I mean by that is when I was a child growing up, most of the images that I was given about Africans in Africa was that of hunger and emaciated children not having enough food and shelter. Or the old Tarzan movies. Like it was the feeding of what it meant to be African. Okay. On the reverse side, I am pretty sure that Africans living in Africa or Africans that lived in Europe, European countries, or even Caribbeans who are also of African descent, saw America as this land of the free, land of the brave, land of the home, land of capitalism. You can go there with nothing and make something of yourself. Um, but it also showed African Americans and this in a negative light as lazy, all the stereotypes, lazy, thugs, killing each other, so on and so forth. So while we Americans and mostly African Americans,
Which I will say is a stereotype given on both sides. So every place has a every race has a stereotype. Every race has a stereotype. But those are some of the stereotypes that are presented about us, right? But we can also say unequivocally that that some of those stereotypes exist, but they are not the majority. And what we should be doing is combating media. You know what was so great? Because I like to highlight people, the things that they did that was well. You know what was so great? And some of you people don't want to hear about this. You know what was so great about Asians? During the whole time when they were sitting there dealing with slavery too and going through racism too and being called all kind of names and everything, Mr. Chan, Mr. Ching, Mr. Wok, Mr. Wan, all in the movies and all that other shit, you know, they decided no more. And you know what they did? They took themselves away from being in movies, from being a stereotype. And instead, what they did was they went back to China and they made their own movies, highlighting the greatness of their culture, of their people. They did so well in the film industry that when it came to the US, we loved it. Kung fu flicks, their Chinese dramas, we loved it. We ate it up. We ate it up. That when they came here, they weren't thrown in those roles anymore. They weren't the dishwasher. They weren't the Mr. Chin. They weren't put in these bad stereotypes anymore. They pulled themselves away from being in those stereotypes. Now, I will say this: when they came back here after some prominence and some good movies over time, when they came here, I will still say that when it comes to the film industry, Asians still got it rough. They're getting out of it though. They're slowly coming through, and not because of crazy rich Asians. They've been coming through for a while, but they're definitely highlighted a hell of a lot more now. But they still come up. They came a long way, and they did it without having to be the worst thing. Can we really still say that for a lot of what we see in the media when it comes to black folks? Yay or nay, depends on your actual perspective. I think that they did it the right way. I think that a lot of Negroes should have did it that way. I'm just saying. Maybe whether they could or not, they could have actually made their own movies or films. I don't know. Times are different. It's hard to say. Like again, not really having much of the culture. They can have a culture they can go back to, things like that. We can it's a thought experiment. But the idea is that they were able to change their image to the point where people don't think that everywhere that they go, like black people, that they're looked at as thugs, singers, drug dealers, uh, anything that has a ball attached to it, ass whoopers and felons. That they can actually believe that there are graceful things about black people. And I will agree with this young lady over here when she says that the thing about foreigners is that they have a disparaging blemish on them because of quote media. The same media that made African Americans look bad is the same media that when we think of black African American Africans, that we think of how many ribs can we count? That we think, damn, they're all living in mud huts. That when we see a little kid and they're running through the videos, all we can go is, in the arms of an angel. And we're like, wow, you came over here and we don't even see a fly on your face. It's fucked up. It's fucked up. Even Trevor Noah had the joke and say, I don't understand how we can have the fly. That I don't know anyone that just can't do this to get the fly away. Yes, there are definitely bad stereotypes. There are definitely them. But for those small segments of people, for those small segments of stereotypes that we deal with, there's a plethora of good, honest, hardworking people. And I think that's the thing that should always be highlighted, but it's not. Because the conversation that we even had is that the minority rules and we allow it. We don't know how math works, folks. We don't know how math works. We allow the limited to dictate what happens to the most. We don't know how math works. This is why probably our voting systems are all fucked up. Just letting you know. Because the majority vote doesn't amount to much. But they make you think it is. But that's a conversation for another time.
Had this way that we thought Africans basically stereotyped African Americans as the things that this lady is describing in the video, and did not see or understand the systemic oppression that still exists to this day. And even more so because Africans chose to assimilate into American culture, American values, which are also closer to white Christian conservative values.
If you see Africans in Africa, there are plenty of systems already put in place that they don't need to come here to quote assimilate to white people. Africa is heavily a Christian nation. Who do you think brought that shit to them? I'll give you a guess. I'll give you a guess. You think they just happened upon Jesus in the desert? Happened upon Jesus in the rainforest? Where do you think they got it from? Come on now. They didn't have to come here in order to assimilate to that. And in fact, if they had come here and they assimilate the same way how quote black people have assimilated, and they're doing better than us, you know how bad that is, right? That means they're being better blacks than us. Hold that one in your head for a moment. That's crazy.
They aligned themselves with non-African American ideals. And what I mean by that is they pushed themselves as far away as they could from African Americans because it benefited them to not be in alignment with African Americans because we were looked down. We were looked down upon Americans as a whole, if that makes sense, you know. So
It starts with your own kitchen. It starts with your own room. When you feed yourself that bullshit, all the things you're gonna have a taste for. So you get something new in your system. When you don't clean up your own room, it's the only thing you're accustomed to. Until you clean up your room, you get a new perspective. That's all I'm gonna say.
it was a benefit to Africans or any POC, non-POC, to say, no, we are not like them. And now that Africans are clearly seeing that, no, there is a systemic, if you don't open your mouth as an African, you're just black. You're just black. Before you talk, you're just black. And when you're just black in America, you are susceptible to all the things that happen to just black people.
I can't. I'm spent. Guys, I'm spent. I can't do it. She gave it to me. I have my fill. I got my fill. I can't do any more of it. If I did any more, I'd have to run out and go get like drown myself. I can't do it anymore. Uh, I wanted to give you guys information and the perspective of people who are over in Africa, and also, did we ever get the answer of whether colonization is the reason why Africa is poor? I can still say to this day that are there some aspects of it that might have played a role? Yes. But do we also get the aspect of other things that Africans actually contributed um to doing that? Also as well. But then we also ran into other parts that we had to quote acknowledge. And what were those parts? That black people here and black people in the main continent, if you want to put it at the main continent, act just the same. I'm just saying. They act just the same. You can say it's different talking points, but the narrative is just the same. And we need to do better as a people. We need to do better in a society. We need to be able to work better together. If we ever expect to see progress, if we ever expect to see change, if we ever expect to see things being better, if we ever want to actually have a fucking count on the scoreboard. Because too many times what we do is that we move the goalposts and we don't count scores. Hopefully you guys have gotten a perspective on just what's looking at here. As you can see, going down the list of the gauntlet, I still, even right now, don't have an actual representation of whether it's due to colonization, because I can say that Africans also contributed to, quite frankly, their own demise. And we see that all over the place. The same way how I even say that African Americans have also done things that contributed to their own demise. And we need to be more honest about that, because the more we take time to look in the mirror, it's the best way for us to be able to figure out what's the best course of action to put us on the right track. But if we're too busy trying to look, you can't see yourself in the picture when you're too busy stuck in the frame, people. You need to get away, get a different perspective. This is why when you're taking a picture of somebody, you can tell them how to pose because they can't see themselves in your eyes. Anyway, guys, I'm going to be giving you guys the time. I spent a little bit more time than I thought here, but I thought this was a really good episode. And quite frankly, there's still so much work to be done. I'm going to be working on a couple of things. Be advised, I'm going to start reaching out to different people about a particular episode that we got going on. If you guys don't remember, it is the episode when it comes to do white people experience racism, and I got some planned up later on from that as well. Guys, you already know I'm going to be taking off when you hear the music, and if you like, you can reach out to me on multiple different mediums. Things are playing / not playing in my system. They're all messed up. I'm not going to worry about it right now. And I will basically be on all the time, where I come on. Of course, you already caught me today on Wednesday at 4 p.m. and also on Saturdays at 4 p.m. And also, I do a show with OG Do Dirty, which happens on Tuesday nights. You can say Tuesday nights, Wednesday mornings. It is 1 a.m. on my time, because I'm from East Coast, which he is Central, so it will be 12 Central. Outside of that, I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you want someone to actually get their own perspective, or to have a perspective, have their look at stuff that they can different. I don't know why I can't think right now. I'm tired. That's what it is. So someone else to be able to have a particular perspective, or to learn something new, to me here, guys, share the video, like if you haven't already, and if anything, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Catch you on the flip side. All the stuff, all the materials or whatever that we have here, I will be linking the video after some time once everything's done rendering. And I'm tired. Guys, I appreciate you for coming here. Thank you for everybody who stopped by. Thank you for everybody who's engaging in the chat. We'll see what's going to be happening for the next stream, which will be on Saturday. And I'm going to think about how interactive I'm going to make it be. It might be a panel episode. I haven't quite figured it out yet. But until then, I will see you in the next one. Stay authentic, stay true, stay opinionated. Till next time, guys.